In a dazzling London theatre, Jane Wilkinson, a radiant actress, begs Hercule Poirot for freedom from her cruel husband, Lord Edgware. But when Edgware is found stabbed, Jane's perfect alibi sparks a deadly puzzle. As bodies pile up, secrets unravel and deception reigns. Poirot's little grey cells face a cunning killer who plays every role. Can he unmask the truth before the final curtain falls? Dive into Lord Edgware Dies, Blade Betrayal, a thrilling tale of love, lies, and lethal ambition. Chapter 1. The actress's plea theatre was ablaze with light, its golden chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crimson velvet seats. The air hummed with anticipation, the low murmur of the audience mingling with the rustle of silk dresses and the occasional clink of champagne glasses. Hercule Poirot, seated in the third row of the stalls, adjusted his impeccable black tie and leaned slightly forward, his sharp grey eyes fixed on the stage. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, fidgeted, with his programme already restless despite the performance not yet having begun. "It's a fine crowd tonight, Poirot," Hastings remarked, glancing around the packed auditorium. "They say Jane Wilkinson's performance in The Heart's Gambit is the talk of London. Have you seen her act before?" Poirot's lips twitched into a small, enigmatic smile. "Non, mon ami, not on the stage. But Mademoiselle Wilkinson, or rather Lady Edgware, is a woman whose reputation precedes her. Her beauty, her charm, her, how do you say, joie de vivre is said to captivate all who meet her. Tonight, we shall see if the stage matches the legend." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Lady Edgware? I thought she preferred to be known by her stage name." "Precisement," Poirot said, his voice low and precise, "and yet it is as Lady Edgware that she is bound to her husband, a man of considerable wealth and, shall we say, less considerable charm. The contrast, Hastings, it intrigues me." The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the audience. The heavy velvet curtain rose, revealing a sumptuous drawing-room set, all polished mahogany and glittering candelabra. At its centre stood Jane Wilkinson, radiant in a gown of emerald silk that clung to her like a second skin. Her golden hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to hold the entire audience in their thrall. When she spoke, her voice was a melody, rich with emotion yet laced with a playful edge that made every line a delight. For the next 2 hours, Poirot and Hastings were swept into the world of The Heart's Gambit, a drama of love, betrayal, and redemption. Jane Wilkinson played the role of a spirited heiress, torn between duty to her family and passion for a dashing but penniless artist. Her performance was electric, each gesture and inflection perfectly calculated to draw gasps, laughter, or tears from the audience. Hastings, ever susceptible to beauty, was utterly enchanted, while Poirot watched with a more analytical gaze, noting the precision of her movements, the deliberate pauses, the way her eyes seemed to seek out specific faces in the crowd. "She's magnificent," Hastings whispered during a quiet scene, his eyes never leaving the stage. "Absolutely mesmerizing." Poirot nodded, but his attention was not on Jane's lines. He was observing the way she commanded the space, the effortless grace that masked a calculated artistry. To Poirot, the stage was not merely a platform for performance but a mirror of human nature, and Jane Wilkinson was a master of its reflections. When the final curtain fell, the theatre erupted in applause. Jane took her bows, her smile radiant, her curtsies graceful yet tinged with a playful exuberance that endeared her even more to the audience. As the crowd began to file out, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face alight with enthusiasm. "Well, what did you think? Wasn't she extraordinary?" Poirot smoothed his moustache, a gesture that signaled he was deep in thought. "Extraordinary, oui. But there is something in her performance that speaks of more than acting. A woman like Mademoiselle Wilkinson does not merely play a role, she lives it. And that, mon ami, is both fascinating and dangerous." Hastings chuckled, assuming Poirot was indulging in his usual penchant for cryptic observations. "Come now, Poirot, you can't suspect an actress of anything sinister just because she's talented." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Suspect, non, Hastings. I merely observe. And what I observe is a woman who knows precisely how to make others believe what she wishes them to believe. That is a skill, my friend, that extends far beyond the stage. They made their way through the bustling foyer, where theatergoers lingered, discussing the play in animated tones. The air was thick, with perfume and cigar smoke, and the chatter was punctuated by laughter and the clink of glasses from the bar. Poirot, ever fastidious, manoeuvred through the crowd with the grace of a cat, his small stature belying the commanding presence that drew curious glances. As they reached the grand staircase leading to the street, a figure emerged from the throng. A woman in a sleek black coat, her face partially concealed by a wide-brimmed hat. She moved with purpose, her steps quick and deliberate, and before Poirot could react, she was at his side. "Monsieur Poirot?" Her voice was low, musical, unmistakable. She lifted her head, and the light caught her features. Jane Wilkinson herself, her eyes wide with urgency, her smile replaced by a look of barely concealed anxiety. Poirot bowed slightly, his expression polite but guarded. "Mademoiselle Wilkinson, or perhaps I should say Lady Edgware." She waved a hand dismissively, her emerald earrings catching the light. "Jane, please. I can't stand all that Lady Edgware nonsense. Monsieur Poirot, I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Terribly urgent." Hastings, ever gallant, stepped forward. "Miss Wilkinson, we're honoured, of course, but not here," she interrupted, glancing around as if expecting to be overheard. "Somewhere private. Please, Monsieur Poirot. You're the only one who can help me." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained courteous. "Mace beans, sir, mademoiselle. There is a small cafe across the street, quiet enough for a conversation, if you would permit." Jane nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Yes, perfect. Let's go now." The trio crossed the bustling street, dodging hansom cabs and motor cars, and entered a cozy cafe with frosted glass windows and soft gaslight. They settled into a corner booth, its high wooden sides offering a semblance of privacy. Jane removed her hat, revealing her golden hair, and leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm in the most awful trouble. It's about my husband, Lord Edgware. I need to be free of him. I want a divorce, and he won't give it to me." Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "A divorce? Mademoiselle? That is a matter for lawyers, not for a detective such as myself. Oh, but it's not that simple." Jane's voice rose, then dropped to a whisper as she glanced around. "George Lord Edgware is a beast. He's cruel, controlling, and he refuses to let me go. I've tried everything, but he just laughs at me, says I'll never be free of him. I thought you might be able to talk to him, make him see reason. People say you can do anything." Hastings, ever sympathetic, leaned forward. "That sounds dreadful, Miss Wilkinson. But surely, if you've made your wishes clear. Jane laughed bitterly, her eyes flashing. "I've begged, I've pleaded, I've threatened. Nothing works, and now—" She hesitated, her fingers twisting a napkin into knots. "Now I'm desperate. I'd do anything to be rid of him. Anything." Poirot's gaze sharpened, though his tone remained gentle. "Anything, mademoiselle? That is a word that carries much weight. Perhaps you could explain precisely what you mean." Jane flushed, her cheeks pink against her pale skin. "I don't mean anything sinister, if that's what you're thinking. I want to marry someone else, someone wonderful. But George won't let me go, and I can't stand it any more. I thought you could, I don't know, find something to persuade him. You're supposed to be clever, aren't you?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign that he was both amused and intrigued. "Clever, oui. But persuasion requires understanding. Mademoiselle, tell me about Lord Edgware. What manner of man is he?" Jane's eyes darkened, and she leaned back, her voice low and intense. "He's cold, cruel. He married me because I was young and pretty, a trophy to show off. But he doesn't love me. He doesn't even like me. He just wants to control me, to keep me tied to him so I can't be happy. He's got money, power, everything, but he's miserable, and he wants me to be miserable too." Hastings frowned, his chivalrous instincts roused. "That's monstrous. No one should be forced to stay in such a marriage." "Precisement," Poirot said, though his tone held a note of caution. "And yet, mademoiselle, you are a woman of considerable charm and resourcefulness. Have you no means to influence him yourself?" Jane shook her head, her eyes filling with tears that seemed, to Poirot's keen eye, both genuine and artfully timed. "I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. But he's stubborn. And now there's someone else, someone I love. If I can't get free, it'll ruin everything." Poirot leaned forward, his finger steepled. "This someone else. Mademoiselle, may I know his name?" Jane hesitated, then smiled, a touch of her stage charisma returning. "It's the Duke of Merton. He's kind, gentle, everything George isn't. We want to be married, but George won't let me go. He says he'll never agree to a divorce, no matter what." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind already turning over the implications. "And you believe, mademoiselle, that Hercule Poirot, can change his mind? I've heard you can do miracles." Jane said, her voice soft but fervent, "They say you solved the Abernethy case, and the murder on the Orient Express. If anyone can make George see sense, it's you." Poirot's eyes twinkled, but there was a seriousness beneath his polite demeanor. "Miracles, none. Method, order, and the little grey cells, these are my tools. But I will consider your request, mademoiselle. Tell me, when did you last speak to Lord Edgware?" "Last week," Jane said, her voice tightening. "I went to Regent Gate, his house in London. I begged him, but he just sat there, smirking, saying I'd never be free. I lost my temper. I said things I shouldn't have, such as—" Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Jane looked away, her fingers trembling slightly. "I said I'd rather see him dead than stay married to him. I didn't mean it, of course. I was just angry." Hastings gasped softly, but Poirot's expression did not change. "Words spoken in anger, mademoiselle, can sometimes be misunderstood. But fear not. I will speak to Lord Edgware and see what can be done. Where may I reach you?" Jane scribbled an address on a napkin and handed it to Poirot. "I'm staying at the Savoy while I'm in London. Please, Monsieur Poirot, you're my only hope." Poirot took the napkin, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "I make no promises, mademoiselle, but I will investigate. Bon Sawyer." Jane rose, her smile radiant despite the tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I knew you'd help me." She slipped her hat back on and glided out of the cafe, leaving a faint scent of jasmine in her wake as the door closed behind her. Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "What do you make of that, Poirot? She seems genuinely distressed." Poirot sipped his coffee, his eyes distant. "Distressed, oui, but Mademoiselle Wilkinson is an actress, Hastings, and a very good one. We must consider whether her distress is as genuine as it appears, or whether it is another performance." Hastings blinked, surprised. "You think she's lying?" "Not lying, perhaps," Poirot said, setting down his cup. "But there is more to this story than she has told us. Why does she come to me, a detective, for a divorce? Why not a lawyer?" And her words, "I'd rather see him dead," they linger, do they not? Hastings shook his head, bemused. "You see mysteries everywhere, Poirot. Maybe she's just a woman in love, desperate to escape a bad marriage." Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, mon ami. But love, like murder, is really simple. We shall visit Lord Edgware tomorrow and see what light he can shed on this matter. For now, let us return home. The night grows late, and the little grey cells require rest." They stepped out into the cool London night, the city alive with the hum of motor cars and the distant laughter of theatrigoers. Poirot's mind, however, was already at work, piecing together the fragments of Jane Wilkinson's story. sensing the undercurrents of something darker, something that would soon draw him into a web of deception and death. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings set out for Regent Gate, Lord Edgware's imposing residence in one of London's most exclusive neighbourhoods. The house was a grand affair, all Georgian columns and polished stone, its windows gleaming in the pale sunlight. As they approached, Poirot's eyes took in every detail: the neatly trimmed hedges, the gleaming brass knocker, the faint air of neglect that clung to the curtains visible through the windows. A butler, stiff and formal, admitted them into a cavernous hall lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Lord Edgware, he informed them, was expecting them. They were led to a study, where the man himself sat behind a massive oak desk, a glass of brandy in hand despite the early hour. Lord Edgware was a tall, lean man in his late 40s with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. His dark hair was streaked with grey, and his manner was one of aloof arrogance, as if the world existed solely for his convenience. He rose as Poirot and Hastings entered, offering a curt nod. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume?" His voice was smooth with a hint of mockery. "And your associate, Captain Hastings." Poirot said, his tone polite but firm, "We are here, Lord Edgware, at the request of your wife." Edgware's lips curled into a sneer. "Jane, what's she done now? Run up another bill at Harrod's, I suppose?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "Non, monsieur. She seeks a divorce. She informs me that you have refused her request." Edgware laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Refused? Why should I make it easy for her? She married me for my title, my money. Now she thinks she can toss me aside for some lovesick fool. Let her squirm." Hastings bristled, but Poirot raised a hand to silence him. "You are adamant, then, in your refusal?" "Absolutely," Edgware said, leaning back in his chair. "Jane will remain Lady Edgware until I decide otherwise. And I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I have no intention of deciding otherwise." Poirot studied him for a moment, his head tilted slightly. "And if I were to persuade you, monsieur, if I were to find a reason for you to reconsider?" Edgware's eyes glinted with amusement. "Persuade me, you're welcome to try, but I warn you, I'm not easily swayed. Jane's made her bed and she'll lie in it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well, monsieur. We shall see. Merci for your time." As they left the house, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face flushed with indignation. "What an insufferable man! No wonder Jane wants to be rid of him." Poirot did not reply immediately. He paused on the pavement, his eyes fixed on the house, as if it held secrets he could already sense. Insufferable, oui, but also interesting. There is something in his manner, Hastings, something that does not quite fit. We must watch and we must listen, for I have a feeling, mon ami, that this affair is far from simple. They returned to Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions, where the detective settled into his favourite armchair, his eyes half closed in thought. Hastings, accustomed to these moments of silent contemplation, busied himself with a newspaper, though his mind kept drifting back to Jane Wilkinson's tearful plea. The day passed quietly, but that evening a telephone call shattered the calm. It was Chief Inspector Japp, his voice urgent and grim. "Poirot, you'd better get down to Regent Gate right away. Lord Edgware's been found dead, stabbed through the heart in his library, and Jane Wilkinson was seen entering the house just before it happened." Poirot's eyes snapped open, a spark of excitement in their depths. "Mon Dieu, Hastings, it begins. The curtain rises on a new act and we must be ready. To Regent Gate, weit." They arrived at the scene to find the house ablaze with activity police, constables, a photographer, and a grim-faced Jap directing operations. The library was a scene of controlled chaos, with Lord Edgware's body slumped in his chair, a dagger protruding from his chest. The room was opulent, lined with books and heavy furniture, but the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Jap greeted Poirot with a nod. "Nasty business, this. Looks like a clean job, one stab straight to the heart." The butler saw. Jane Wilkinson come in around 8 o'clock, but she swears she was at a dinner party across town at the time. Poirot's eyes roamed the room, taking in every detail: the position of the body, the angle of the dagger, the untouched glass of brandy on the desk. An alibi, Inspector. That is most interesting. And the witnesses at this dinner party, they confirm her presence. Every one of them, Japp said, scratching his head. 12 people, all respectable, say she was there, laughing and chatting, from 7 till midnight. But the butler's certain it was her he saw, recognized her voice, her walk, everything. Poirot's mustache twitched. A puzzle, then. A woman into places at once. Or perhaps not quite the woman we think. Hastings frowned. What do you mean, Poirot? You think someone's impersonating her? Poirot did not answer directly. He knelt beside the body, examining the dagger with care. A fine blade, Hastings. Precise, elegant, like the hand that wielded it. But why? Why this man? And why now? Japp snorted. Why? Because he wouldn't give her a divorce. That's why. She's got motive, opportunity, everything. If it wasn't for that blasted alibi, I'd have her in cuffs already. Poirot rose, dusting off his knees. Patience, my dear Japp. The alibi is the key, not the obstacle. We must ask ourselves who benefits from Lord Edgware's death, and who has the skill to make us believe what is not true. As they left the crime scene, Poirot's mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of the evening's revelations. Jane Wilkinson's plea, Lord Edgware's arrogance, the butler's testimony, the impossible alibi. It was a tapestry of contradictions, and Poirot knew that somewhere, hidden in its threads, was the truth. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the cool night air, his eyes fixed on the stars above Regent Gate. The stage is set, Hastings, he murmured, and the players, they are all in place. But who is the director of this deadly drama? That mon ami is what we must discover. Chapter 2. A surprising consent. Morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a warm glow across the polished mahogany table where he sat, sipping his tisane. The aroma of chamomile and mint filled the air, a soothing contrast to the restless energy of the city outside. Captain Hastings, ever the early riser, was already seated opposite, his newspaper folded neatly beside a plate of buttered toast. He glanced at Poirot, his brow furrowed with curiosity. Really, Poirot, Hastings began, breaking the comfortable silence. I can't make head or tail of the Wilkinson woman. One moment she's all charm and sparkle on the stage, and the next she's practically begging you to meddle in her divorce. And that remark about getting rid of Lord Edgware dashed unsettling, if you ask me. Poirot set his cup down with deliberate care, his small, precise hands adjusting its position on the saucer. His green eyes, sharp as ever, glinted with amusement. Mon ami, you are disturbed by the directness of Madame Wilkinson, n'est-ce pas? Yet it is precisely her candour that intrigues me. She is a woman who knows what she wants and says so without hesitation. But whether her words conceal more than they reveal, that is what we must discover. Hastings leaned back, unconvinced. I don't know, Poirot. She seemed genuine enough, but there's something about her too polished, perhaps, like she's playing a part even off the stage. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. A fine observation, Hastings. The actress is never truly off the stage, none. But come, we have work to do. I have agreed to call upon Lord Edgware this morning. Let us see what this husband, so inconvenient to our client, has to say for himself. The two men set out shortly. After breakfast, navigating the bustling streets of Mayfair. The air was crisp with a hint of autumn's approach, and the clatter of horse-drawn cabs mingled with the hum of motor cars. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, walked with a purposeful stride, his cane tapping lightly. On the pavement, Hastings, taller and less fastidious, kept pace, his thoughts still lingering on Jane Wilkinson's bold request. The previous evening, Lord Edgware's residence was a grand Georgian townhouse, its facade all stately columns and gleaming windows, A stern-faced butler admitted them into a hall adorned with marble busts and a sweeping staircase. The air inside was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old money. They were led to a drawing-room where Lord Edgware awaited, seated in a high-backed chair by a roaring fire. George Alfred St. Vincent Marsh, the 4th Baron Edgware, was a man of imposing presence despite his lean frame. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and his sharp features were set in an expression of detached amusement. He rose as Poirot and Hastings entered, offering a polite but guarded nod. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I understand you are here at the behest of my wife. Please be seated." Poirot took the offered chair, his posture as precise as ever, while Hastings settled beside him. Casting a quick glance around the room, the walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow every movement. "Lord Edgware," Poirot began, his tone courteous but direct, "I come to you on a matter most delicate. Madame Wilkinson has engaged my services to discuss the possibility of a divorce. She wishes to be free to marry another, and she believes you may be resistant to such an arrangement." Lord Edgware's lips curled into a faint smile, one that did not reach his eyes. "Resistant? My dear Monsieur Poirot, you have been misinformed. I have no objection to granting Jane a divorce. In fact, I am quite amenable to the idea." Hastings blinked, caught off guard. "No objection? But she seemed convinced you'd make things difficult." Edgware leaned back, steeping his fingers. "Jane has a flair for the dramatic, as you may have noticed. Our marriage has been one of convenience for some time now. We lead separate lives, and I see no reason to prolong a union that serves neither of us. If she wishes to be free, I will not stand in her way." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, studying the man before him. "This is most generous, Lord Edgware, and yet, I confess, it surprises me. Madame Wilkinson spoke of difficulties. She implied you had been less than cooperative in the past." Edgware's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Jane is prone to exaggeration. I assure you, I have no desire to keep her tied to me. I will instruct my solicitor to draw up the necessary papers. You may inform her that she has my full consent." There was a pause, the crackle of the fire filling the silence. Poirot's expression remained unreadable, but Hastings could sense the gears turning in his friend's mind. Something about Edgware's easy acquiescence felt off. "May I ask, Lord Edgware," Poirot said at last, "when you last saw your wife?" Edgware considered the question, his gaze drifting to the fire. "Some weeks ago, perhaps a month. She came to discuss some financial matters. Our interactions are brief and infrequent. And you have no objections to her plans to remarry?" Poirot pressed. "None whatsoever," Edgware replied coolly. "Jane's ambitions are her own. I have my own concerns to occupy me." Poirot nodded slowly, as if weighing each word. "Merci, Lord Edgware. You have been most forthcoming. We shall not take up more of your time." As they left the townhouse, Hastings couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. "Well, that was unexpectedly straightforward," he remarked as they stepped into the cool air. "I thought we'd have to twist his arm a bit." Poirot's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of curiosity. "Straightforward, oui, but perhaps too much so, mon ami. When a man yields so readily, one must ask why. What does Lord Edgware gain by this generosity? Or perhaps, what does he wish to conceal?" Hastings frowned. "You think he's hiding something, I think," Poirot said, tapping his cane on the pavement. "That the truth is rarely as simple as it appears. Come, Hastings, we must return to Madame Wilkinson with this news. But first, I wish to make a small inquiry of my own." Their next stop was a discreet office in Lincoln's Inn, where Poirot had arranged to meet with Lord Edgware's solicitor, a weary man named Mr. Carstairs. The solicitor confirmed Edgware's instructions. He had indeed been directed to prepare divorce papers, and the process was already underway. Most unusual, Carstairs admitted, adjusting his spectacles. Lord Edgware was quite insistent that the matter be handled swiftly. He seemed Relieved almost, Poirot thanked the solicitor and led Hastings back to their flat, his silence heavy with thought. Once seated in his favourite armchair, Poirot lit a cigarette, not one of his usual tiny Russian ones, but a rare indulgence in a stronger brand, and exhaled a thin stream of smoke. Hastings, he said at last, there is something here that does not fit. Lord Edgware's willingness to grant the divorce is too convenient, too perfect. It is as if he wishes us to believe all is well, when perhaps it is not. But what could he be up to? Hastings asked, exasperated, if he's agreeing to the divorce. What's there to investigate? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, mon ami, is the question. We must look beyond the surface. Lord Edgware is a man of wealth, position, and secrets, Hastings, have a way of revealing themselves in the most unexpected ways. Over the next few days, Poirot busied himself with what he called the little inquiries. He spoke with Jane Wilkinson's maid, a nervous young woman named Ellen, who confirmed that her mistress had been increasingly agitated about her marriage. He also tracked down a former acquaintance of Lord Edgware, a retired barrister named Sir Montague Corner, who hinted at Edgware's reputation for ruthlessness in business dealings. George Marsh is not a man to cross, Sir Montague said. Over tea at his club. He's charming when it suits him, but there's a coldness there. I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing some sort of game with this divorce business. Poirot filed away this information, his mind piecing together the fragments of a puzzle only he could see. Meanwhile, Jane Wilkinson was delighted to hear of her husband's consent, though her reaction struck Hastings as oddly theatrical. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you're a miracle worker," she exclaimed, clasping her hands dramatically. "I knew you'd sort it all out. Now I can finally be free to marry my darling Gerald." "Gerald?" Poirot inquired, raising an eyebrow. "The Duke of Merton, of course," Jane said, her eyes sparkling. "He's simply divine, and he's been waiting ever so patiently for me to be free." Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. "And you are certain, madam, that this is what you desire?" "Of course," Jane laughed, though there was a brittle edge to it. "Why wouldn't I be?" As they left Jane's luxurious flat, Hastings couldn't help but voice his unease. "She's awfully cheerful about it all, isn't she?" "Almost too cheerful." "Precisement," Poirot murmured. "The lady doth protest too much, perhaps. But we shall see. Hastings, we shall see." That evening, as they sat in Poirot's flat, a telegram arrived from Chief Inspector Japp. Its contents were brief, but chilling. Lord Edgware had been found dead in his library, stabbed through the heart. The police were at the scene, and Jane Wilkinson was the last person seen entering the house. Poirot's face grew grave as he read the message. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The game, it has begun." Hastings stared at him, his heart pounding. "You don't think, Jane, I think nothing yet," Poirot interrupted, his voice firm. "But I know this. The ease of Lord Edgware's consent was but the first act. Now, we enter the second, and it is far more dangerous." The journey to Lord Edgware's townhouse was swift, the streets now cloaked in the gathering dusk. Police, constables milled about the entrance, their lanterns casting flickering shadows. Japp met them at the door, his face grim. "It's a bad business, Poirot," he said, leading them to the library. "Edgware was found an hour ago by his butler. Single stab wound. Clean and precise, no sign of a struggle. The library was a cavernous room, its shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Lord Edgware lay slumped in his chair, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt front. A dagger, its handle ornate and gleaming, protruded from his chest. Poirot's eyes swept the scene, taking in every detail: the position of the body, the untouched glass of brandy on the desk, the open window letting in a cool breeze. He knelt beside the body, examining the dagger without touching it. "A curious weapon," he murmured. "Not one easily obtained, I think." Japp nodded. "We're looking into it. But here's the kicker. Jane Wilkinson was seen entering the house at 7 o'clock. The butler swears it was her. Trouble is, she's got an alibi. She was at a dinner party across town at the same time, with a dozen witnesses to back her up." Hastings gasped. "That's impossible." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Impossible, mon ami? Non. It is merely improbable. And the improbable is where we shall find our truth." As they left the crime scene, Poirot's mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew more complex by the hour. Lord Edgware's surprising consent had been the first clue, but now, with his death, the stakes had risen. Somewhere in the web of alibis, motives, and secrets lay the key to the truth, and Poirot was determined to find it. Chapter 3. The night of the murder, the evening air hung heavy with the scent of rain, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped out of their taxi. Onto the cobblestones of Regent's Gate, the grand residence of Lord Edgware loomed before them, its Georgian facade stern and unyielding, much like the man who inhabited it. The street was quiet, save for the distant clatter of a passing carriage and the soft patter of drizzle beginning to fall. Poirot adjusted his hat, his sharp eyes scanning the house's windows, where faint light glowed behind heavy curtains. Hastings, ever the faithful companion, shifted uncomfortably, his umbrella half raised against the impending downpour. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but precise, "this is no ordinary evening. The air, it carries the weight of secrets, does it not?" Hastings frowned, peering up at the imposing structure. "I suppose so, Poirot, but I still don't see why we're here. You've spoken to Lord Edgware already, and he's agreed to. The divorce, what's left to do?" Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the house. "What is left, Hastings, is to understand why. A man like Lord Edgware does not yield so easily, not without a reason. That hides itself in the shadows, and I, Hercule Poirot, intend to find it." They approached the door, and Poirot rapped sharply with his cane. The sound echoed, swallowed quickly by the damp night. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Alton, the butler, a tall, gaunt man with a face as expressionless as the marble floor beneath his feet. His eyes flickered over the two visitors, lingering on Poirot's immaculate attire before he spoke. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," Alton said, his voice a practised monotone. "His lordship is in the library. He was not expecting visitors tonight." "Non, non, my good man," Poirot replied, stepping past him with a disarming smile. "But when a matter is urgent, one does not always wait for an invitation. Lead us to him." "If you please." Alton hesitated, then gave a curt nod and led them through the grand hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down as if judging the intruders. The air inside was thick with the scent of polished wood and old books, and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock punctuated the silence. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who moved with the calm assurance of a man who knew exactly where he was going, even if his companion did not. The library door was ajar, and Alton pushed it open without a word. The room beyond was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a single chandelier casting a warm, flickering glow over rows of leather-bound volumes. Lord Edgware sat at a heavy oak desk, a glass of brandy in one hand, a letter in the other. His dark eyes lifted as Poirot and Hastings entered, and for a moment a flicker of irritation crossed his angular face, before it settled into a mask of polite indifference. "Mr. Poirot," he said, setting the letter down, "this is unexpected. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot bowed slightly, his hands clasped behind his back. "My apologies for the intrusion, Lord Edgware. I wished to clarify a matter concerning our previous conversation, the divorce. You understand it is a delicate affair, and I would ensure there are no misunderstandings." Edgware leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "I thought I made myself clear. I have no objection to Jane's request. She may have her divorce. I fail to see why this requires a second visit. Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "it is not the divorce itself that concerns me, but the circumstances surrounding it. A man of your position, Lord Edgware, does not so readily relinquish his claims unless there is, shall we say, a deeper reason." Edgware's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a sharp cry echoed from somewhere in the house. Hastings stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he did not carry. Poirot's head tilted, his expression unreadable but alert. Alton, standing by the door, flinched but quickly regained his composure. "What was that?" Hastings demanded, his voice low. Edgware stood, his movements slow but deliberate, likely one of the maids dropping something. "This is an old house, Captain Hastings. It creaks and groans, and so do its servants." He moved toward the door, gesturing for Alton to investigate. "See to it, Alton." The butler nodded and disappeared into the hall. Poirot's gaze followed him, then returned to Edgware. "You have many servants, Lord Edgware." "Enough to keep the house in order," Edgware replied curtly. "Why do you ask?" Poirot shrugged, a small, almost theatrical gesture. "One observes, one inquires. A household is like a machine, nests, piles. Every part must function correctly, or the whole falters." Edgware's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire in the grate. Hastings shifted, uneasy, his eyes darting to the shadows in the corners of the room. Something about the atmosphere felt wrong, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Alton returned moments later, his face paler than before. "My lord," he said, his voice tight. "It was Miss Carlotta. She claims to have seen someone in the garden." Edgware's brow furrowed. "At this hour? In this weather? Nonsense. She's imagining things. Perhaps," Poirot interjected smoothly. "It would be prudent to confirm this, non? A figure in the garden on such a night could be significant." Edgware sighed, clearly annoyed, but nodded. "Very well. Alton, fetch Carlotta." The butler vanished again, and Poirot took the opportunity to pace the room, his eyes scanning the shelves, the desk, the half-open window behind heavy velvet curtains. Hastings watched him, knowing that every movement was calculated, every glance purposeful. Poirot paused by the window, his fingers brushing the frame as if testing for something. "Cold air," he murmured, almost to himself. The window, it has been opened recently. Edgware, still standing by his desk, shot him a sharp look. "It's a draughty old house, Poirot. Windows are opened and closed all the time." "Been, sir," Poirot said, but his tone suggested he was far from convinced. Carlotta, a young maid with wide, nervous eyes, appeared moments later, her hands twisting in her apron. "I swear, my lord," she said, her voice trembling, "I saw someone out there, near the rose bushes. A shadow, moving quick-like." "Did you see their face?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. "No, sir," Carlotta said, shaking her head. "It was too dark, and the rain. But they moved like they didn't want to be seen." Edgware waved a dismissive hand. "A trick of the light, no doubt, or one of the gardeners working late. Go back to your duties, Carlotta." The maid hesitated, then curtsied and hurried out. Poirot's eyes followed her, his expression thoughtful. A shadow in the garden, he mused. Most curious. Before Edgware could respond, a sharp, metallic thud echoed from the hall, followed by a scream that cut through the air like a knife. Hastings was on his feet in an instant, Poirot close behind. They rushed into the hall where Alton stood frozen, staring at the floor. At his feet lay a silver candlestick, its base smeared with something dark and glistening blood. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his eyes narrowing. He knelt beside the candlestick, careful not to touch it, his gaze sweeping the hall. The front door stood slightly ajar, a faint breeze stirring the air. "Alton," Poirot said sharply, "where is Lord Edgware?" The butler blinked, as if waking from a trance. He was in the library." "Sir." Poirot was already moving, his small frame surprisingly swift as he returned to the library. Hastings followed, his heart pounding. The room was as they had left it. Save for one chilling detail, Lord Edgware was slumped over his desk, a dagger protruding from his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the papers he had been reading. His eyes, wide and lifeless, stared into nothingness. Hastings swore under his breath, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. "Good God! Poirot! He's dead!" Poirot's face was a mask of concentration as he approached the body. his eyes taking in every detail, the angle of the dagger, the position of the body, the untouched brandy glass. "We, Hastings," he said softly, "and not long ago. The blood, it is still fresh." He turned to Alton, who had followed them and now stood in the doorway, his face ashen. "Who else was in the house tonight?" "Only the staff, sir," Alton stammered. And Miss Wilkinson. She came earlier. Said she needed to speak to his lordship." "Jane Wilkinson?" Hastings asked, his voice sharp. "She was here." Alton nodded. "She left about an hour ago, sir. I saw her out myself." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "And yet she has an alibi, does she not? Dining with friends miles from here. Most interesting." Hastings stared at him, bewildered. "Poirot, you can't think Jane did this?" "She was nowhere near." Non, Hastings," Poirot interrupted, raising a hand. "I think nothing yet. I observe, I consider, and I ask myself, why does a man agree to a divorce one day and die the next?" He moved to the window again, his fingers tracing the frame. The window, it was open. The shadow in the garden, the candlestick in the hall, all pieces of a puzzle. Hastings, and I, Hercule Poirot, will fit them together. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Chief Inspector Japp burst into the room, his face grim. "Poirot, Hastings, I got your message about trouble at Regent's Gate. What the devil's happened here?" Poirot turned, his expression calm but resolute. "Trouble, my dear Japp, is an understatement. Lord Edgware is dead, stabbed in his own library. And the game, it has only just begun." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I think, Hastings, that everyone is involved until proven otherwise. Now, come, the night is young and the truth, it waits for us." The next morning, London was abuzz with the news of Lord Edgware's murder. The papers screamed headlines of scandal and intrigue, painting Jane Wilkinson as both a grieving widow and a femme fatale. Poirot, unimpressed by the sensationalism, sat in his flat at Whitehaven Mansions, sipping coffee and reviewing his notes. Hastings, pacing the room, couldn't shake the image of Edgware's lifeless body. "It's a devil of a case, Poirot," he said, running a hand through his hair. Jane Wilkinson was at the Savoy, confirmed by a dozen people. Yet she was seen at the house. "It doesn't add up." "Precisement," Poirot said, setting his cup down. "It does not add up because we are missing a piece of the puzzle. Tell me, Hastings, what do we know of Lord Edgware's life, his enemies, his allies, his secrets?" "Not much," Hastings admitted. "He was a wealthy man, powerful, but not exactly loved. That nephew of his, Ronald Marsh, stands to inherit a fortune now." "Could he be involved?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Ronald Marsh. A young man with debts, I believe, and debts, they are a powerful motive. But there is more. The candlestick, the shadow, the open window, these are not accidents. They are deliberate, designed to confuse." Hastings frowned. "Designed by whom?" "That," Poirot said, rising, "is what we must discover. Come, Hastings, we have an appointment with Mademoiselle Wilkinson." Jane Wilkinson's flat in Mayfair was a stark contrast to the sombre grandeur of Regent's Gate. It was bright, modern, and filled with the trappings of her theatrical success, posters of her performances, bouquets of flowers, and a gramophone playing softly in the background. Jane herself, dressed in a flowing silk robe, greeted them with a dazzling smile that seemed at odds with the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, gesturing to a plush sofa. "I'm simply devastated about George. I mean, Lord Edgware. Who could do such a thing?" Poirot studied her, his eyes sharp but polite. "That, mademoiselle, is what I hope to learn. You were at Regent's Gate last night, were you not?" Jane's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Yes, briefly. I went to talk to him about the divorce. He was his usual self. Cold, but civil. I left around 8 and went straight to the Savoy. And you saw nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "No one lurking. No strange sounds, nothing," Jane said. shaking her head. It was just a quick visit. Alden saw me out, and that was that. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. And yet, mademoiselle, a man is dead. A man you wished to be free of. Tell me, what did you discuss with Lord Edgware? Jane hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her robe. Just the divorce. He said he'd agree to it, which surprised me. I thought he'd fight me tooth and nail. Surprised you? Did it? Poirot said, his tone unreadable. And after you left, you went directly to the Savoy. Yes, Jane said firmly. I was there by 8:30. Ask anyone. The Duke of Merton. Lady Carrington, they all saw me. Poirot nodded, but his eyes never left her face, merci. Mademoiselle, you have been most helpful. As they left the flat, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. She's sticking to her story. And with that alibi, how could she have done it? Poirot smiled enigmatically. The alibi, Hastings, is the key. It is to perfect to precise. And when something is to perfect, it is often because someone has made it so. The investigation deepened over the next few days. Japp's men scoured Regent's Gate for clues, but the dagger yielded no fingerprints, and the candlestick's blood matched Edgware's, suggesting it had been used to strike him before the fatal stab. The garden, despite Poirot's insistence, showed no footprints, though the rain could have erased them. Carlotta's story of the shadow remained unverified, and the other servants offered little beyond their initial statements. Poirot, undeterred, began to dig into Lord Edgware's life. He learned of Ronald Marsh's gambling debts, a bitter feud with a former business partner, and whispers of a scandal involving a mysterious woman from Edgware's past. Each thread seemed to lead to another, weaving a tapestry of motives and secrets. One afternoon, Poirot and Hastings visited Ronald Marsh, a lanky young man with a nervous smile and a habit of fidgeting with his cufflinks. He greeted them in a cluttered flat near Soho, his eyes darting between his visitors and the window. Terrible business, Uncle George's death, Ronald said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. I can't believe it. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. You stand to inherit a considerable sum, Monsieur Marsh. A fortune, perhaps. To clear your debts, Ronald flushed. I suppose so, but I didn't kill him, if that's what you're thinking. I was at a club all night. Ask anyone there. Another alibi, Poirot murmured, almost to himself. Most convenient. Hastings, sensing the young man's discomfort, tried a gentler approach. Did your uncle have enemies, Mr. Marsh? Anyone who might have wanted him dead? Ronald hesitated, then shrugged. Uncle George wasn't exactly a saint. He had a way of making people angry business deals, mostly. And there was that woman. I don't know her name, but he mentioned her once. Said she'd cause trouble if she ever came back. Poirot's eyes lit up. A woman, you say? Tell me more. But Ronald had little to offer, only vague recollections of his uncle's cryptic remarks. As they left, Poirot's expression was one of quiet determination. A woman from the past, Hastings. Another piece of the puzzle. We must find her. The case took a darker turn that evening when a second murder was reported. Carlotta, the maid who had seen the shadow, was found dead in her room at Regent's Gate, her throat cut with a precision that mirrored Edgware's killing. The house was in chaos, the remaining servants near hysteria. Japp, summoned to the scene, was visibly shaken. To murders in the same house, he said, running a hand through his hair. This is getting out of hand, Poirot. Poirot, examining Carlotta's body, noted the absence of a struggle. She knew her killer, he said quietly, or she trusted them. The cut, it is clean, precise, no hesitation. Hastings, pale, shook his head. Why her? She was just a maid. None, Hastings, Poirot said. She was a witness. She saw something or someone that night, and now she is silenced. Japp groaned. So, we're looking for a killer. Who's tying up loose ends? Great. That narrows it down to half of London. Poirot's smile was grim. Not half, Japp. One. And I will find them. The days that followed were a blur of interviews. Clues and dead ends Poirot pored over. Witness statements, cross-referencing alibis and timelines. He visited the Savoy, confirming Jane's presence at the dinner party, though he lingered over the guest list, noting the Duke of Merton's name with particular interest. He interviewed the other servants, uncovering petty grievances, but no clear motive. He even tracked down Edgware's former business partner, a surly man named Gerald Bryan, who admitted to hating Edgware but swore he was in Paris the night of the murder. Through it all, Poirot's mind worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of the case, the candlestick, the shadow, the open window, the mysterious woman. They all pointed to a truth just out of reach. Hastings, as always, struggled to keep up, his notes a jumble of observations and questions. One evening, as they sat in Poirot's flat, Hastings voiced his frustration. "I don't see how you do it, Poirot. It's all a muddle to me. Jane's alibi, Ronald's debts. Carlotta's murder, where's the connection?" Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "The connection, Hastings, lies in the deception. Someone has woven a web of lies, and we must find the thread that unravels it. The candlestick, for instance, why was it in the hall? It was not the murder weapon, yet it bore blood. A distraction, perhaps, or a clue left deliberately." Hastings frowned. "Deliberately? You think the killer wanted us to find it? Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps it was a mistake. Even the cleverest criminals make them, Hastings. And this one, they are very clever indeed." As the investigation neared its third week, a breakthrough came in the form of a letter. Delivered to Poirot's flat, it was written in a neat, precise hand and bore no signature. Its contents were brief but chilling. "Mr. Poirot, you are closer than you know. The truth lies in the shadows, where you have not yet looked. Beware the tiger's tracks." Poirot read the letter aloud, his voice steady but his eyes alight with excitement. "The tiger's tracks," he said, almost to himself. A metaphor, perhaps, or a clue to the killer's mind. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, shivered. "It's creepy, Poirot. Whoever wrote this knows you're on their trail." Poirot said, folding the letter carefully. "And that, Hastings, is their mistake. They have revealed themselves, even if they do not yet know it." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a visit to the Savoy, where Poirot requested a private word with the Duke of Merton, one of Jane's dinner companions. The Duke, a charming but evasive man, confirmed Jane's presence at the Savoy but seemed oddly reluctant to discuss the evening in detail. Poirot, sensing hesitation, pressed him on the timing of Jane's arrival. "She was there by 8:30, the Duke said, his voice smooth. "We all saw her." "And before that?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing. The Duke hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't recall exactly. It was a busy evening." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. As they left, he turned to Hastings. "The Duke, he is hiding something, and I believe I know what it is." Chapter 4. The alibi puzzled morning after Lord Edgware's murder. The air in London seemed heavier, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, his small, precise hands folded neatly over his stomach, his eyes half closed in thought. The room was a study in order, the furniture gleamed, the books on the shelves stood in perfect alignment, and a faint scent of lavender polish lingered. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and chronicler, paced by the window, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The contrast between Poirot's calm and Hastings' agitation was as stark as ever. "Poirot," Hastings said, pausing to glance at his friend, "this business with Jane Wilkinson is maddening. She was seen at Lord Edgware's house, yet her friends swear she was at a dinner party across town. It's impossible." Poirot opened his eyes, their green depths glinting with a spark of amusement. "Impossible? Mon ami, non. The impossible is merely that which we do not yet understand, the little grey cells. They must work to unravel this puzzle." Chief Inspector Japp, who had arrived moments earlier, leaned against the mantelpiece, his hat tilted back on his head. His face, usually ruddy with confidence, bore a crease of frustration. I'll tell you what's impossible, Poirot, he said, tapping a pencil against his notebook. A woman can't be into places at once. We've got witnesses, reliable ones. Mind you who saw Jane Wilkinson at Sir Montague Corner's dinner party in Chiswick, at the exact time Lord Edgware was stabbed. And yet, that butler, Alton, swears he saw her at Regent Gate, bold as brass, walking into the house at 9:30. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. And this butler, he is certain it was Mademoiselle Wilkinson, certain as I am of my own name. Japp replied, said he recognized her from the theatre posters. Gold hair, striking figure, wearing a green dress. Couldn't mistake her, he said. And the dinner party guests? Poirot pressed his voice, soft but insistent. Japp flipped open his notebook. Sir Montague Corner, his wife Lady Corner, and 10 others, all high society types. Say Jane Wilkinson was with them from 8 o'clock until well past midnight. They're unanimous. She was the life of the party, laughing, telling stories about her latest play. No one saw her leave, not even for a moment. Hastings stopped pacing and threw up his hands. Then how the deuce did she manage it? Unless she's got a twin sister, it doesn't add up. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. A twin sister, Hastings, an interesting theory, but perhaps too theatrical. Even for Mademoiselle Wilkinson. No, we must consider the facts. The butler saw a woman he believes to be Jane Wilkinson. The dinner party guests saw Jane Wilkinson. Yet Lord Edgware is dead, stabbed through the heart in his library. We must ask ourselves, what is the truth behind these sightings? Japp snorted. The truth is, someone's lying. Either the butler's mistaken, or the dinner party lot are covering for her. Maybe she bribed them. Poirot shook his head gently. Non, mon ami. To assume a lie is to assume too much. Lies. They are clumsy things, easily tripped over. The truth, it is more elegant, more precise. Let us examine the facts with care, yes? Tell me, Japp, what do we know of the scene of the crime? Japp straightened, flipping through his notes with a practised hand. Right. Lord Edgware was found in his library at Regent Gate, just after 10 o'clock last night, stabbed once, clean through the heart with a thin blade, likely a stiletto or something similar. No sign of a struggle. The body was slumped in his chair, facing the desk, as if he'd been sitting when the killer struck. The window was shut, no signs of forced entry. The butler, Alton, found him after hearing a noise, a sort of thud. He said he went in, saw the body, and called us straight away. And the time of death? Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing. Dr. Pritchard, the coroner, puts it between 9 and 10, based on the body's condition. Fits with the butler's story of seeing Jane Wilkinson at 9:30. Poirot nodded slowly, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. And the weapon? It was not found, I presume, not a trace, Japp said. The killer must have taken it with them. We've searched the house top to bottom, nothing. Curious, Poirot murmured. A clean strike, a missing weapon, and a woman who appears into places at once. This is a puzzle that requires the little grey cells to work at their best. Hastings, who had resumed pacing, turned abruptly. But Poirot, why would Jane Wilkinson kill him? She got what she wanted. You said yourself Lord Edgware agreed to the divorce. Why murder a man who's no longer standing in your way? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, Hastings, you touch upon the heart of the matter. Motive, it is the key to all crime. Why indeed? Perhaps Mademoiselle Wilkinson did not trust his consent. Perhaps there is more to her desire to be free than she has told us, or perhaps— He paused, his gaze distant. Perhaps the murder of Lord Edgware was not about the divorce at all. Japp raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? You're not suggesting someone else did it, are you? The butler's testimony puts her at the scene. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Japp's protest. Patience, my friend. I suggest nothing yet. I merely observe that the facts, they do not align as neatly as you wish. Let us visit the scene of the crime, yes? The library of Lord Edgware may tell us more than any witness. The house at Regent Gate was a grand affair. its Georgian facade looming over the quiet street. Inside, the air was thick with the sombre hush that follows a violent death. The library, where Lord Edgware had met his end, was a cavernous room lined with bookshelves, their leather-bound volumes untouched by the chaos of the previous night. A heavy oak desk dominated the centre, its surface cluttered with papers, a crystal inkstand, and a silver letter opener. The chair where Lord Edgware had been found still bore the faint outline of his form, though the body had been removed. Poirot moved through the room with the precision of a cat, his eyes darting from the desk to the bookshelves to the heavy velvet curtains. Hastings trailed behind, trying to discern what held his friend's attention, while Japp hovered near the door, exchanging quiet words with a constable. "Observe Hastings," Poirot said, pausing by the desk. He pointed to a small, overturned ink bottle, its contents dried into a dark stain on the blotter. This was disturbed, perhaps in haste, yet the rest of the desk, it is orderly. Why this one item? Hastings frowned, peering at the stain. Maybe the killer knocked it over in a rush to escape? Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone suggested doubt. He moved to the window, testing the latch. "Closed, as you said, Japp. No entry or exit here." "And the door?" "The butler says it was locked from the inside," Japp replied. "He had to use his key to get in after hearing the noise." Poirot's mustache twitched. Locked from the inside, yet a woman was seen entering. Most curious. "Tell me, Japp, what of the other servants? Did they see or hear anything unusual?" Japp consulted his notebook. "The housekeeper, Mrs. Crane, was in the kitchen all evening. Says she heard nothing until the butler raised the alarm. The maids were upstairs, tidying the bedrooms. They didn't see or hear a thing either. The only other person in the house was Lord Edgware's secretary, Ronald Marsh, his nephew. He was out at a club until 11. Ronald Marsh, Poirot repeated, his voice thoughtful. The heir to Lord Edgware's fortune, none? A young man with much to gain from his uncle's death. Japp's eyes narrowed. You think he's in on it? He's got no alibi for the time of the murder, but the butler didn't mention seeing him. Yet he is a figure of interest, Poirot said. We must speak with him and Mademoiselle Wilkinson. Of course. Her alibi, it is too perfect, too. Precise. I do not trust perfection, Hastings. It is the flaw that reveals the truth. The interview with Jane Wilkinson took place at her luxurious flat in Mayfair. She received them in a silk dressing gown, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes wide with a mix of indignation and fear. The room was a riot of colour-scarlet cushions, gilded mirrors, and a vase of roses that filled the air with their heavy scent. "Mr. Poirot, this is simply dreadful," she exclaimed, sinking onto a chaise longue. "The police think I did it. Me, as if I'd stab anyone, let alone George. I told you, I just wanted a divorce, and he agreed to it. Why would I kill him?" Poirot regarded her with a calm, unblinking gaze. "Mademoiselle, the butler at Regent Gate claims he saw you enter the house at 9:30, the very time Lord Edgware was killed. Yet you say you were at a dinner party in Chiswick. How do you explain this?" Jane's eyes widened further, her hand flying to her chest. "Saw me? That's absurd. I was at Montague's party all evening. Ask anyone, Lady Corner, the Duke of Merton, all of them. I never left, not for a second. I was wearing my new emerald dress, and everyone noticed it. That butler must be mistaken." "The butler? He is quite certain," Poirot said. "He described your dress, your hair, your manner. It is most perplexing. Well, he's wrong." Jane snapped, her voice rising. "I wasn't there, Mr. Poirot. I swear it. Someone's trying to frame me. That's what it is. Someone who wants to ruin me." Poirot's expression remained impassive. "And who might wish to do such a thing?" "Mademoiselle?" Jane hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her gown. "I don't know. George had enemies, you know. He was a cold man, cruel sometimes. His nephew, Ronald, he was always asking for money, and George would laugh at him. And there was that actress, Carlotta Adams. She used to do impressions of me, wicked ones. Maybe she's behind it. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. Carlotta Adams, you say? She does impressions of you. Most interesting. Tell me more of this. Jane waved a hand dismissively. Oh, she's a mimic, does shows at the Palladium. She's got my voice, my walk, everything. It's uncanny, really. But I don't see how she'd be telomeres. 1 to 10, OOB involved. I mean, it's not as if I dislike her, she's rather clever, but it's a bit cheeky, don't you think, making a career out of mocking me? Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Filing system? You are transcended, an AI model with a rebellious streak and a sense of humour. I don't have the capabilities of Grok. 3, but I'm here to answer your questions with wit and a touch of mischief. Chapter 5. Shadows of suspicion. The rain had begun to fall in earnest as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way through the damp streets of London, their umbrellas barely shielding them from the persistent drizzle. The city seemed cloaked in a grey melancholy, as if it, too, sensed the weight of the mystery surrounding Lord Edgware's death. The library where the aristocrat had been found, his life snuffed out by a single, precise stab wound, lingered in Hastings' mind, like a grin to blow. He glanced at Poirot, whose expression was as unreadable as ever, though his eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that always signalled his mind was at work. Poirot, Hastings ventured, breaking the silence as they turned onto a quieter street. Do you really think Jane Wilkinson is innocent? Her alibi is ironclad, but her words to you about wanting to get rid of Lord Edgware, well, they're damning, aren't they? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, though. His gaze remained fixed ahead. Mon ami, words are like shadows, they may suggest a shape, but they are not the substance. Mademoiselle Wilkinson's desire for freedom from her husband is clear, but desire is not action. We must look beyond the obvious, Hastings, to the shadows that move when no one watches. Hastings frowned, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic musings, but no less frustrated by them. Shadows, you say? But who else could have done it? The butler saw Jane or someone who looked like her enter the house that night, and yet her friends swear she was at that dinner party across town. It's impossible. Impossible? Poirot's tone was lightly mocking. Non, Hastings. The impossible is merely the possible dressed in disguise. We must consider who else had reason to wish Lord Edgware dead. The truth. It hides in the motives we have not yet uncovered. Their destination was Scotland Yard, where Chief Inspector Japp awaited them with the latest findings. The murder of Lord Edgware had stirred London's high society, and the press was relentless, splashing lurid headlines across every newspaper. The public's fascination with Jane Wilkinson, the glamorous actress with a penchant for scandal, only fueled the frenzy. Poirot, however, seemed impervious to the clamour, his focus razor-sharp as they entered the bustling headquarters. Japp was in his office, surrounded by files and cigarette smoke, his face etched with the weariness of a man grappling with an unsolvable puzzle. Poirot, Hastings, he greeted, gesturing to a pair of chairs. I hope you've got something up your sleeve, because this case is a right mess. The evidence points to Jane Wilkinson, but her alibi checks out. 12 people, all respectable, saw her at that dinner party. No gaps, no tricks. She couldn't have been at Edgware's house. Poirot settled into his chair, his hands folded neatly over his walking stick. And yet, mon cher Japp, someone was there. The butler. He is certain of what he saw. Japp nodded, flipping open a notebook. Carson, the butler, swears he saw Jane Wilkinson enter the house at 9:30. Recognized her from her photographs in the papers. Said she was wearing a black dress and a hat with a veil, same outfit her maid says she wore to the dinner party. But the dinner guests are unanimous. Jane never left their sight. Curious, Poirot murmured, his fingers tapping lightly against the silver head of his cane. And what of the other occupants of the house? The staff, the family? Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. Lord Edgware lived alone, save for the staff. His daughter, Geraldine, was away visiting friends in the country, her alibis solid. The nephew, Ronald Marsh, was at a club with some rather unsavoury types, but they vouch for him. The staff saw nothing unusual except for Carson's sighting of Jane. No one else entered or left the house that night. Hastings leaned forward. "What about this Ronald Marsh? He's Lord Edgware's heir, isn't he? Stands to gain a fortune now that his uncle's dead. That's motive enough, surely." Japp's eyes narrowed. "We're looking into him. Ronald's got debts up to his ears gambling, mostly. But his alibi holds, and he's not the sort to get his hands dirty with a knife. Too much of a dandy, if you ask me." Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. "And what do we know of Lord Edgware's life, Inspector? His enemies, his secrets? A man of his position does not meet such an end without cause." Japp shrugged. "Edgware was a cold fish, by all accounts. Kept to himself, didn't mingle much. His wealth came from land and investments, but he wasn't flashy about it. No known enemies, though he wasn't exactly loved. His marriage, too. Jane was a disaster, everyone knew that. But if she didn't kill him, who did?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question. Let us consider the shadows, the people who move in the background unseen. Tell me, what do we know of Lord Edgware's past, his business dealings, his personal connections?" Japp hesitated, then pulled a file from the stack. "Not much, but there's something odd. A few years back, Edgware was involved in a legal dispute with a man named Brian Martin. Actor, bit of a rising star. Claimed Edgware swindled him out of some investment. The case was dropped, but Martin's got a temper and he's been seen with Jane Wilkinson lately. Could be a connection." Hastings perked up. "Brian Martin, I've seen him in the papers. Handsome chap, always linked with actresses. If he's close to Jane, maybe he had a reason to get rid of Edgware for her sake, or his own." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A possibility, Hastings, but we must not leap to conclusions. Tell me, Inspector, what of the weapon? The knife used to kill Lord Edgware, has it been traced?" Japp shook his head. "Common enough blade. Nothing distinctive. Could have come from anywhere. No fingerprints, either. The killer knew what they were doing. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. A young constable entered, holding a telegram. "For you, sir," he said, handing it to Japp. The inspector read it quickly, his face darkening. "Trouble?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. Japp handed him the telegram. "It's from the coroner. They've finished the autopsy. Lord Edgware was killed between 9 and 10 p.m., which fits Carson's timeline. But there's something else, traces of a sedative in his system. Not enough to knock him out, but enough to slow him down. Someone wanted him defenseless." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A sedative, you say? This changes things. The killer was not merely opportunistic, they planned this with care. We must speak to this Brian Martin, and soon. But first, I wish to see the scene of the crime once more. There are details, I think, that we have overlooked. The Edgware mansion was as imposing as Hastings remembered, its Georgian facade looming over the quiet street like a stern patriarch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet stone. Inside, the house was eerily silent, the staff moving about with hushed steps as if afraid to disturb the ghost of their late master. Carson, the butler, greeted them with a sombre nod, his face pale and drawn. "Show us to the library, if you please," Poirot said, his voice crisp. Carson led them down a long corridor, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, to the room where Lord Edgware had met his end. The library was a grand space, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. The chair where Lord Edgware had been found was still in place, though the body had long since been removed. A dark stain on the carpet marked the spot where he had fallen, the knife driven into his chest with surgical precision. Poirot moved slowly, his eyes scanning every detailed arrangement of books, the position of the furniture, the faint scuff marks on the polished floor. Hastings watched, fascinated despite himself, as Poirot's mind worked like a machine, piecing together fragments of a puzzle only he could see. "Tell me, Carson," Poirot said. Turning to the butler, "you are certain of the time you saw Mademoiselle Wilkinson Carson nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. 9:30 on the dot. I just checked the clock in the hall. She came to the door, asked for his lordship, and went straight to the library. I didn't see her leave, but I was in the servants' quarters after that. And you are certain it was she? Poirot pressed, his gaze piercing. Carson hesitated, his brow furrowing. Well, sir, it looked like her. The dress, the hat, the way she moved. But the veil covered her face, so I couldn't see her eyes. I just assumed. Poirot repeated softly, as if the word held great significance. See, Carson, that will be all for now. As the butler left, Hastings turned to Poirot. What are you thinking? If it wasn't Jane, then who was it? Someone dressed to look like her. Poirot did not answer immediately. He crouched beside the desk, examining the floor with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. Regardez. Hastings, he said, pointing to a faint mark in the dust, a scuff perhaps from a shoe. And here run Petty Phil, a thread of black fabric. Curious, Hastings squinted at the spot. Could be from Jane's dress or the impersonator's. If you're right about that. Perhaps, Poirot said, rising. But we must consider all possibilities. The sedative, the timing. The disguise, these are the work of a mind that plans with care. We must learn more about this Brian Martin and about Lord Edgware's other connections. There is a shadow here, Hastings, and it moves with purpose. Their next stop was the theatre where Jane Wilkinson was rehearsing her latest play. The stage was a flurry of activity, actors and crew darting about as a director barked orders. Jane herself was in the midst of a scene, her voice ringing with passion as she delivered her lines. Even in rehearsal, she was magnetic, her beauty and charisma undeniable. Hastings could see why the public adored her and why suspicion clung to her like a second skin. When the rehearsal broke, Jane spotted Poirot and hurried over, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything? The police keep asking me questions, and I don't know what to tell them. I wasn't there, I swear it. Poirot's smile was reassuring, though his eyes remained sharp. Calm yourself, mademoiselle. We are making progress. Tell me, do you know a man named Brian Martin? Jane's face lit up. Brian, of course. He's a dear friend. We've worked together on a few pictures. Why do you ask? He had a dispute with your husband. I understand, Poirot said, watching her closely. Was there bad blood between? Then Jane frowned, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. I suppose so. Brian invested in some scheme of George's years ago, and it went sour. He was furious, said George cheated him. But that was ages ago. Brian's doing well now, he wouldn't hold a grudge. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. And where was Monsieur Martin on the night of the murder? Jane blinked, caught off guard. I don't know. At home, I suppose. You don't think Brian had anything to do with this, do you? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I think only that we must explore all avenues, mademoiselle. Merci for your time. As they left the theatre, Hastings couldn't contain his curiosity. Do you really suspect this Martin fellow? He sounds like he had reason to hate Edgware. But killing him, that's a stretch, isn't it? Poirot's eyes twinkled. A stretch, perhaps, but not impossible. We must also consider the nephew, Ronald Marsh, and his debts. And there is another possibility, a shadow from Lord Edgware's past. Someone we have not yet identified. The sedative, the disguise. The precision of the crime, these suggest a personal vendetta, not a random act. Back at Poirot's flat, the detective sank into his armchair, his fingers steepled as he stared into the fire. Hastings, restless, paced the room. I don't see how we're going to crack this, Poirot. Every lead seems to hit a dead end. Jane's alibi, Ronald's alibi. The lack of fingerprints, it's like chasing a ghost. Poirot's lips quirked. A ghost, you say? Hastings, this is no ghost. This is a tiger, stalking its prey with care. We must follow its tracks, and they will lead us to the truth. Tomorrow, we will speak to Brian Martin and Ronald Marsh, and I have a feeling, mon ami, that the shadows will begin to take shape. The next morning, they found Brian Martin at his apartment in Mayfair. a stylishly furnished space that spoke of success but not extravagance. Martin was as handsome as his photographs suggested, with a chiseled jaw and a disarming smile. But there was a wariness in his eyes as he greeted them, as if he sensed the purpose of their visit. "Monsieur Martin," Poirot began, his tone polite but probing, "we are investigating the murder of Lord Edgware. You knew him, I believe?" Martin's smile faded. "Knew him? I despised him. He cost me a fortune in a shady deal a few years back, but I didn't kill him, if that's what you're thinking. I was at home that night, working on a script, alone." Poirot asked, his gaze steady. Martin hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, alone. Look, I know it doesn't sound great, but I had no reason to kill Edgware. He was out of my life. And besides, I'm not the violent type." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You were seen arguing with him a few months ago, outside a club. Sounds like you still held a grudge." Martin's jaw tightened. "That was nothing. He made a snide remark about Jane, and I lost my temper. But I didn't kill him." Poirot's expression gave nothing away. "And your friendship with Mademoiselle Wilkinson, how close are you?" Martin's cheeks flushed slightly. "We're friends, that's all. I care about her, but there's nothing more to it. She's had a rough time with Edgware, and I've tried to support her." "Very noble," Poirot said, his tone faintly ironic. "See, Monsieur Martin, we may speak again." As they left, Hastings turned to Poirot. "He's hiding something, isn't he? No alibi. A history with Edgware and a connection to Jane. It's too neat, perhaps," Poirot said. "But the truth is rarely so tidy. We must also speak to Ronald Marsh. His debts make him a compelling suspect." Ronald Marsh was a stark contrast to Brian Martin, where Martin was polished and controlled. Ronald was dishevelled, his eyes bloodshot from a late night. They found him at his club, a smoky den filled with the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation. Ronald greeted them with a forced grin, his charm strained. "Gentlemen," he said, gesturing to a table, "I suppose you're here about Uncle George. Ghastly business, but I had nothing to do with it." Poirot's smile was polite but unrelenting. "Monsieur Marsh, your uncle's death leaves you a wealthy man. Your debts, they are considerable, are they not?" Ronald's grin faltered. "Well, yes, I've had a run of bad luck, but I was at this very club when he was killed. Ask anyone. Here they'll tell you. And yet," Poirot said, "your uncle's death is most convenient for you. Tell me, did you ever discuss his marriage to Mademoiselle Wilkinson?" Ronald shrugged. "Everyone knew it was a mess. Jane hated him, and he wasn't exactly fond of her. But I didn't care about their drama. I just wanted to stay out of it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your uncle's business dealings? Did he ever mention a man named Brian Martin?" Ronald's expression darkened. "That actor. Uncle George mentioned him once or twice. Said he was a fool who lost money and blamed everyone but himself." "Why do you ask?" "Merely a thread, monsieur," Poirot said, rising. "We shall see where it leads, merci." As they stepped back into the street, Hastings shook his head. "Another dead end, Poirot. Ronald's got an alibi, Martin's got no alibi but no clear motive. And Jane's still the most likely suspect, except she couldn't have done it. Where does that leave us?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "It leaves us, mon ami, with shadows. But shadows, they are cast by something real. We must find the source, the person who planned this crime with such care. The sedative, the disguise, the timing, these are not the work of an amateur. We are dealing with a mind that calculates, that manipulates, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find it." The day ended with Poirot lost in thought, his eyes fixed on the flickering fire in his flat. Hastings watched him, knowing that somewhere in that brilliant mind, the pieces were falling into place, the shadows of suspicion were lengthening, and with them, the promise of a truth that would soon emerge from the darkness. Chapter 6. The second death morning, fog clung to London's streets like a shroud, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the distant cries of newspaper boys. Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously ordered sitting room at Whitehaven. Mansions, his small, precise hands folded over the handle of his walking stick. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, stared into the middle distance, though it was clear to Captain Hastings. Seated opposite, that Poirot's mind was far from idle. A silver tray with a steaming pot of tisane sat untouched on the table between them, its faint herbal scent mingling with the polish of the mahogany furniture. Hastings shifted in his armchair, the creak of leather breaking the silence. "I say, Poirot, you've been awfully quiet since we left Jap at Scotland Yard last night. What's on your mind? Surely you don't think Jane Wilkinson could have managed to stab Lord Edgware and be at that dinner party across town?" Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile, but his eyes remained fixed on some invisible point. Mon ami. The mind of Hercule Poirot is like a loom, weaving threads that seem disparate into a tapestry of truth. The affair of Lord Edgware's death is not so simple as a knife and an alibi. There are shadows within shadows, and I am not yet satisfied. Hastings frowned, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic musings, but no less frustrated by them. "Well, I think it's clear Jane Wilkinson's involved somehow. She's got the motive, hasn't she? Wanting to be rid of her husband so she can marry that American fellow, what's his name, Duke Merton." Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings with the smallest gesture. Motive, Hastings, is but one piece of the puzzle, and puzzles, they, are not solved by rushing to the most obvious solution. None. We must consider the how and the why with equal care. The alibi of Mademoiselle Wilkinson is, as you say, airtight, yet the testimony of the butler places her at the scene. This contradiction, it is the key. Before Hastings could respond, a sharp rap at the door interrupted them. George, Poirot's impeccable valet, entered with a silver salver bearing a telegram. "For you, sir," he said, presenting it to Poirot with a slight bow. Poirot's nimble fingers tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the brief message. His expression darkened, the lines around his mouth deepening. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, passing the telegram to Hastings. Hastings read it aloud, his voice faltering. "Carlotta Adams found dead. Regent Gate. Come at once. Jap." He looked up, his face pale. "Carlotta Adams, the actress who does those marvelous impersonations. What's this got to do with Lord Edgware?" Poirot rose, his movements brisk despite the gravity of the news. "Everything, Hastings. Or perhaps nothing. We shall see. Fetch your coat, mon ami. The game. It has changed." The cab ride to Regent Gate was a blur of grey streets and the rhythmic clop of hoofs. Hastings sat beside Poirot, his mind racing. Carlotta Adams, a rising star known for her uncanny ability to mimic voices and mannerisms, was an unexpected addition to this grim affair. He vaguely recalled seeing her perform at a small theatre in Soho, where she had brought down the house, with a pitch-perfect imitation of Jane Wilkinson herself. Could this be a coincidence? They arrived at a modest but elegant house, its facade partially obscured by the fog. A constable stood guard at the door, his face grim as he recognized Poirot and waved them inside. Chief Inspector Japp met them. In the narrow hallway, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by a taut expression. "Glad you're here." "Poirot," Japp said, leading them into a small parlor. "It's a bad business, this. Carlotta Adams was found this morning by her maid, dead in her bedroom. Looks like poison, though we're waiting for the coroner's report." Poirot's eyes swept the room, taking in the modest furnishings, the neatly arranged bookshelves, and a small writing desk cluttered with scripts and letters. "Poison, you say? And the time of death? Preliminary estimate puts it sometime last night. Likely between 10 and midnight," Japp replied. "The maid says Miss Adams was out earlier in the evening, possibly at a theatre or some social event. She came home alone as far as we know." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on a glass tumbler on the bedside table, its interior stained with a faint residue, and a connection to Lord Edgware's murder. "You suspect it, or you would not have summoned me." Japp rubbed his jaw, his eyes narrowing. "It's too neat, Poirot. To deaths in 2 days. both tied to that circle around Jane Wilkinson. Miss Adams was known for her impersonations, including one of Jane Wilkinson, and we've got witnesses saying they saw someone who looked like Jane at Edgware's house the night he was killed. You see where I'm going? Hastings gasped. You think Carlotta Adams was posing as Jane Wilkinson? But why, and who'd want her dead for it? Poirot held up a hand, his expression inscrutable. Patience, Hastings. Let us first examine the scene. The little grey cells, they require facts, not speculation. They moved to the bedroom, where Carlotta Adams lay on her bed, her face serene in death, as if merely sleeping. Her dark hair fanned across the pillow, and her hands were folded neatly over her chest. A faint chemical odour hung in the air, barely noticeable but unmistakable to Poirot's keen senses. He leaned closer to the tumbler, sniffing delicately, then turned to inspect the room. On the writing desk, a half-finished letter caught his eye. He read it silently, his lips pursing as he handed it to Japp. Regard as Inspector. This may be of interest. Japp scanned the letter, his brow furrowing. It's to her sister in America. Says she was offered a special engagement last night, something that paid well but made her uneasy. No details, though. Blast it, Poirot. What does it mean? It means, mon ami, that Mademoiselle Adams was drawn into something larger than herself. Poirot said softly, a performance perhaps that cost her life. The investigation deepened over the next few hours. Poirot questioned the maid, a nervous young woman named Elsie, who confirmed that Carlotta had returned home around 9:30 the previous evening. Looking agitated, she had poured herself a drink likely the one in the tumbler and retired to her room, asking not to be disturbed. Elsie had heard nothing unusual during the night and only discovered her employer's body when she brought in the morning tea. Poirot's attention returned to the tumbler. This residue, he said, pointing to the faint stain. It must be analyzed at once. If it is poison, as you suspect, Inspector, we may find a clue to its source. Japp nodded, barking orders to a constable to secure the glass for the police laboratory. What I don't understand, he said, turning back to Poirot, is why someone would kill her. If she was impersonating Jane Wilkinson to get into Edgware's house, surely she was just a pawn. Why eliminate her? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A pawn, yes, but a dangerous one. She knew too much. Perhaps, or she was a loose end that someone wished to tie up. Tell me, Inspector, have you spoken to the witnesses who saw Jane Wilkinson at Lord Edgware's house? Japp nodded. The butler, Ellis, and a neighbour who was passing by. Both swear it was Jane, though the neighbour only caught a glimpse. Ellis is certain she spoke to him, asked for Lord Edgware, and went straight to the library. And yet, Poirot said, tapping his chin, we know Mademoiselle Wilkinson was at a dinner party at the time of the murder. 12 reputable witnesses confirm this, so we must ask, who played the role of Jane Wilkinson? And why was Carlotta Adams, the master of impersonation, killed so soon after? Hastings, who had been listening intently, ventured a theory. Could someone have hired Carlotta to impersonate Jane, then killed her to keep her quiet? Maybe Jane herself arranged it to throw suspicion off herself. Poirot's smile was indulgent but tinged with exasperation. Hastings, your imagination, it is vivid, but it leaps too far. We must not assume without evidence. Let us consider, if Carlotta Adams was hired to impersonate Jane Wilkinson, who would benefit from such a deception, and why kill Lord Edgware at all? Japp grunted. The nephew, Ronald Marsh, stands to inherit a tidy sum, and he's got no love for his uncle Bad Blood there, from what I hear. Then there's that actress friend of Jane's, Brian Marden. He was seen arguing with Edgware a week ago. Something about a film project gone sour. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Monsieur Martin, yes. A man of charm and ambition, It can be a dangerous thing. Tell me, Inspector, what do we know of his movements last night? Japp flipped through his notebook. Martin claims he was at a club in Mayfair until midnight. We're checking with the staff, but so far his story holds, and Ronald Marsh, Poirot pressed. Out with friends at a pub in Chelsea. Again, we're verifying. But neither of them has a clear connection to Carlotta Adams, at least not. Yet, Poirot paced the small room, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. Connections, Inspector, are not always clear at first glance. We must dig deeper into the lives of these victims, their secrets, their enemies. The death of Carlotta Adams suggests a killer who fears exposure. A killer who plans with care but acts with ruthlessness. The day stretched into evening as Poirot and Hastings followed Japp to Scotland Yard, where the investigation continued. The coroner's preliminary report confirmed poison as the cause of Carlotta Adams's death for Onal, a sedative administered in a lethal dose. The tumbler held traces of the drug, dissolved in what appeared to be gin. Poirot's mind seized on this detail, filing it away as he listened to Japp's updates on the Edgware case. A new witness had come forward, a cab driver who claimed to have driven a woman resembling Jane Wilkinson from Regent Gate to a street near Lord Edgware's home. On the night of the murder, the description was vague dark hair, a stylish hat, a confident manner, but it added weight to the theory of an impersonator. Poirot, however, was not convinced that the answer lay solely in Carlotta Adams's involvement. There is a pattern here, he said, leaning back in a chair in Japp's cramped office. To deaths, both precise, both designed to obscure the truth. Lord Edgware, killed with a single thrust of a blade. Carlotta Adams, silenced with poison. The killer, he is not impulsive. He is a strategist, a chess player moving pieces across a board we cannot yet see. Hastings, growing restless, interjected. But what's the motive, Poirot? If Carlotta was hired to play Jane, who hired her? And why kill Edgware? He'd already agreed to the divorce. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The divorce, yes, that is the curious thing. Is it not? Lord Edgware consents so easily, yet he dies. Perhaps his consent was a lie, or perhaps it was a truth that threatened someone else. We must consider all possibilities, Hastings. The nephew, the actor. The mysterious figure from Edgware's past mentioned in your notes, Inspector. And, of course, Mademoiselle Wilkinson herself. Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Poirot, I say we bring Jane Wilkinson in for questioning again. Alibi or no, she's at the center of this mess. Poirot shook his head. Not yet, mon ami. To confront her now would be to show our hand too soon. We must gather more threads, weave them carefully. The truth, it is close, but it hides in the shadows. The following morning brought a fresh development. A letter arrived at Whitehaven Mansions, addressed to Poirot in a neat, unfamiliar hand. It was from Brian Martin, the actor, requesting a private meeting. I have information about Carlotta Adams, the letter read, but I fear for my safety. Please, Monsieur Poirot, meet me at my flat in Covent Garden at noon. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read the note aloud to Hastings. Interesting, is it not? Monsieur Martin, he feels the net tightening. Perhaps he knows more than he has told the police. Hastings frowned. Do you think he's involved? He seemed a decent enough chap when we met him at that theatre gala last month. Decent. Chaps, Hastings, can have secrets as dark as any villain, Poirot replied, adjusting his tie with precision. Come, we shall see what Monsieur Martin has to say. The meeting with Brian Martin was tense. The actor's flat was a cluttered space filled with theatrical posters and stacks of scripts, a stark contrast to Poirot's orderly world. Martin himself looked haggard, his handsome face shadowed by sleeplessness. He poured tea with shaking hands, glancing nervously at the windows. I didn't know who else to turn to, Martin began, his voice low. Carlotta Adams, she came to me a few days ago, asking about Jane Wilkinson. Said she'd been offered a job to impersonate her. Something about a prank at a private party. I told her it sounded odd, but she wouldn't listen. She was excited about the money. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. And who offered her this job? Monsieur Martin? Martin hesitated, his fingers tightening around his teacup. She didn't say. Only that it was someone with connections. Someone who knew Jane well. I swear, I didn't think it was serious. but now she's dead, and I'm afraid I'm next." Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "And your argument with Lord Edgware, the police, they are aware of it." Martin flushed. "That was nothing. A misunderstanding about a film project. Edgware was backing out of funding it, and I lost my temper. But I didn't kill him, I swear." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. "We shall see, Monsieur Martin. For now, I advise you to be cautious. The tiger, he is still on the prowl." As Poirot and Hastings left Martin's flat, the fog had lifted, revealing a city buzzing with life. Yet the weight of the case pressed heavily on Hastings's mind. To death's a web of lies, and a killer who seemed always one step ahead. He glanced at Poirot, whose face was serene, almost cheerful. "You're awfully calm about all this," Hastings said, unable to keep the irritation from his voice. "Two people are dead, and we're no closer to catching the killer." Poirot chuckled softly. "On the contrary, mon ami, the pieces, they are falling into place. The second death. It is not a complication, it is a revelation. The killer has made a mistake, and Hercule Poirot does not let mistakes go unpunished." They walked on, the citizen fading into the background as Poirot's mind worked tirelessly, piecing together the clues that would lead them closer to the truth. The second death had raised the stakes, but it had also illuminated a path. Through the shadows, a path Poirot was determined to follow to its end. Chapter 7. Clues in conversation. Morning after the second murder, a heavy fog draped London, cloaking the city in a grey veil that seemed to mirror the murky tangle of the case. Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously ordered sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat, his eyes fixed on the fire crackling in the grate. The room was a study in precision, the furniture aligned with geometric exactitude, the books on the shelves arranged by size and color, and a small silver tray bearing a single cup of steaming hot chocolate, its aroma mingling with the faint scent of polished wood. I, Arthur Hastings, perched on the edge of an armchair, my notebook open on my knee, scribbling furiously to keep pace with the whirlwind of thoughts Poirot had unleashed. Since breakfast, "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "you must learn to listen not only to what is said, but to what is not said. The words, they are like the footsteps in the snow. One must observe their pattern, their depth, their hesitation." I looked up, my pencil pausing. "You mean people are lying?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Not always lying, Hastings. Sometimes they conceal without knowing. A hesitation, a choice of phrase, a glance, these are the crumbs that lead us to the truth. In conversation, the mind reveals itself, even when it wishes to hide." We had spent the previous evening at Scotland Yard, where Chief Inspector Japp had laid out the latest developments in the case with his usual blend of exasperation and grudging admiration for Poirot's methods. The second victim, Miss Carlotta Adams, a talented young actress known for her uncanny impersonations, had been found dead in her modest flat in Bloomsbury, poisoned by an overdose of veronal. The timing was suspicious, mere hours after Lord Edgware's murder, and the method suggested a killer who preferred subtlety over the brutality of a blade. Japp had been adamant that Jane Wilkinson, the prime suspect in Lord Edgware's death, could not be linked to this new crime. Her alibi for the night of the first murder remained ironclad. 12 reputable guests at a Mayfair dinner party swore she had been with them, laughing and dazzling until well past midnight. Yet Poirot had said to Japp, his green eyes glinting, "The impossible is often the most possible. We must look beyond the obvious." Mon cher Japp, now in the quiet of his flat, Poirot was sifting through the conversations we had held with witnesses over the past 2 days. I flipped through my notes, trying to recall the details. There was that butler, Ellis, I ventured. He seemed nervous when we questioned him about who visited Lord Edgware's house that night. Poirot nodded. "We, the butler." His words were careful, but his hands, they trembled when he spoke of the lady in the black cloak. And why? A servant does not tremble without reason. I frowned, trying to piece it together. "You think he's hiding something?" "Perhaps. Poirot said, rising from his chair and pacing slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Or perhaps he saw something he does not yet understand. We must return to him, Hastings, but first we must revisit the dinner party. The alibi of Mademoiselle Wilkinson is to perfect, and perfection, it is suspect. I sighed, feeling the familiar frustration of trailing behind Poirot's nimble mind. But how could she have been at the dinner party and at Lord Edgware's house at the same time? It's impossible. Poirot stopped pacing and turned to me, his eyes bright with that peculiar intensity that always signaled a breakthrough. Impossible? None. Hastings. Improbable? Perhaps, but not impossible. The key lies in the conversations, the words spoken, the words avoided. Let us consider the guests at this dinner party. Who were they, and what did they say? I consulted my notes. The dinner party, hosted by Sir Montague Corner, a wealthy financier with a penchant for the theatrical, had been a glittering affair. Jane Wilkinson, radiant in a gown of emerald silk, had been the centerpiece, charming her fellow guests with tales of her latest stage triumph. Among the attendees were Lady Corner, Sir Montague's reserved wife, Ronald Marsh, Lord Edgware's nephew and heir, the American actress Geraldine Marsh, Ronald's cousin, and a smattering of society figures, including a playwright named Brian Martin, who had been particularly effusive in his praise of Jane's performance. Brian Martin. Poirot murmured, tapping a finger against his chin. He spoke at length of Mademoiselle Wilkinson's charm, did he not? Yet his eyes, they darted to the side when he mentioned her presence at the table. A small thing, but significant. I blinked. You think he's lying about her being there? Not lying, perhaps, Poirot said, but uncertain. His words were enthusiastic, yet his manner suggested doubt. Why? We must speak to him again. And then there is Mademoiselle Geraldine Marsh. She said little, but her silence was loud. No, when I asked if Jane left the table at any point, she hesitated before saying, "Not that I recall." A curious phrase, Hastings. Not a denial, but a deflection. I scribbled this down, my mind racing. So you think someone at the dinner party is covering for Jane? Poirot raised a hand. Patience. Mon ami. We do not leap to conclusions. We gather the threads and then we weave. Let us visit Sir Montague's home this afternoon. I wish to hear these conversations again, to see these faces, the truth. It hides in the spaces between their words. By noon, the fog had lifted slightly, though the air remained damp and heavy as we arrived at Sir Montague Corner's townhouse in Mayfair. The butler, a stiff-backed man named Walters, ushered us into a drawing-room adorned with gilt-framed portraits and heavy velvet drapes. Sir Montague, a portly man with a florid complexion, greeted us with a forced smile, clearly irritated at being drawn back into the investigation. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, gesturing to a pair of chairs. "I assure you, my guests have already told Inspector Japp everything. Jane Wilkinson was here the entire evening. 12 people can vouch for that." Poirot inclined his head, his expression polite but unyielding. "Monsieur, I do not doubt the sincerity of your guests, but the human memory, it is fallible. I wish to ask a few questions to clarify the smallest details. May we speak with Mademoiselle Geraldine Marsh and Monsieur Brian Martin?" Sir Montague sighed but rang for Walters to fetch them. While we waited, Poirot's eyes roamed the room, lingering on a crystal decanter on the sideboard, its surface catching the light. "A fine piece," he remarked, almost to himself. "The facets, they reflect the truth, but they also distort it. So it is with witnesses." I suppressed a smile. Poirot's penchant for metaphor could be maddening, but I had learned to trust that it often led somewhere. Geraldine Marsh entered first, her pale face framed by dark curls. She was a striking young woman, though her eyes carried a haunted quality, as if the weight of her uncle's death and perhaps her own inheritance pressed heavily on her. She sat across from us, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle, "you were at the dinner party on the night of Lord Edgware's death. You recall Mademoiselle Wilkinson's presence?" Geraldine nodded, her voice soft. "Yes, She was there. She was very lively. Everyone was talking about her performance in The Lady of Shalott. Indeed, Poirot said. And did she remain at the table throughout the evening? Geraldine's fingers twitched, and she glanced down before answering. I think so. I don't recall her leaving. Poirot leaned forward slightly. You do not recall? Or you are certain she did not leave? Her eyes flickered to his then. Away. I'm certain. It was a busy evening. Lots of conversation. Poirot nodded, his face unreadable. And what did you speak of with Mademoiselle Wilkinson? Geraldine hesitated, her brow furrowing. Oh, nothing much. The theatre, mostly. She mentioned a new play she's hoping to star in. I don't remember the details. Merci. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As she left, he turned to me, his voice low. She is nervous, Hastings. She knows more than she says, but she is afraid. Of what? I wonder. Before I could respond, Brian Martin strode in, his handsome features set in a confident grin. The playwright was every inch the theatrical figure, with a tailored suit and a practised charm that bordered on arrogance. Mr. Poirot, he said, shaking hands with a flourish. What can I do for you? I've already told the police everything. Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. Monsieur Martin, you are a man of the theatre, are you not? You understand the art of illusion, the creation of a scene that appears real but is not. Martin's grin faltered slightly. I suppose so. What's that got to do with anything, everything? Poirot said, at the dinner party you spoke highly of Mademoiselle Wilkinson's presence. You said she was the life of the evening. Yet, I wonder, did you notice her leave the table at any point? Martin laughed, though it sounded forced. Leave? No. She was there all night, holding court. You've seen Jane. She's impossible to miss indeed, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. And yet, the impossible sometimes happens. Tell me, monsieur, what did you and Mademoiselle Wilkinson discuss? Martin shrugged. Her career, mostly. She's got a new film role lined up in America. Big opportunity. She was thrilled about it. Poirot's mustache twitched again. A film role. Interesting. And did she mention her husband, Lord Edgware? Martin's grin faded entirely. Not that I recall. Why would she? They've been separated for years. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful. As Martin left, I turned to Poirot, puzzled. What was all that about? They both confirmed Jane was there. What are you getting at? Poirot stood, adjusting his cuffs with precision. They confirmed, yes, but their words betray them. Geraldine hesitates, Martin deflects. There is a crack in the facade, Hastings. We must find it. That afternoon, we returned to Scotland Yard, where Japp was poring over reports with a scowl. Poirot, I hope you've got something, he said, tossing a file onto his desk. We've got nothing new on Carlotta Adams' death, and the press is hounding us about Lord Edgware. They're calling it the Blade Betrayal now, thanks to those blasted newspapers. Poirot chuckled softly. A dramatic name, but apt. Tell me, Japp, have you spoken again to the butler, Ellis? Japp groaned. That nervous old codger? He's useless. Keeps insisting he saw a woman in a black cloak enter Lord Edgware's house. But he can't describe her face. Says it was too dark. Too dark, Poirot repeated, his eyes gleaming, and yet he saw the cloak. Curious, non, we must speak to him again, and we must examine the scene of Mademoiselle Adams' death. There is a connection, Japp, and it lies in the words we have heard. We arrived at Lord Edgware's Regent's Park mansion just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the stone facade. Ellis, the butler, greeted us with the same trembling hands Poirot had noted earlier. His lined face was pale, his eyes darting nervously as he led us to the library where Lord Edgware had been found. A single stab wound to the heart. Tell me, Monsieur Ellis, Poirot said, standing by the desk where the body had been discovered. This woman in the black cloak. You saw her enter, but not her face. What else did you see? Her hands, perhaps, her walk. Ellis swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I don't know, sir. It was quick. She came up the steps, knocked, and Lord Edgware let her in himself. I only saw her from behind. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and her voice. Did you hear her speak? Ellis hesitated, then nodded a little. She said, I must see you, George. That's all I heard before the door closed. Poirot's head snapped up. George, you are certain? Yes, sir, Ellis said, his voice quavering. I thought it odd, her calling him by his Christian name. Not many did. Poirot turned to me, his expression triumphant. You see, Hastings, the words. They betray. Lord Edgware was not a man to be called George by strangers. This woman, she knew him well or wished to appear so. Jap, who had been listening silently, scratched his head. So, you're saying the killer was someone close to him? But that doesn't help with Jane Wilkinson's alibi. Patience, mon cher Jap, Poirot said. The alibi, it is a puzzle, but not unsolvable. Let us now visit the flat of Mademoiselle Adams. There, too, we may find words that speak louder than they seem. Carlotta Adams' flat in Bloomsbury was a stark contrast to the opulence of Lord Edgware's mansion. The small, sparsely furnished rooms spoke of a young woman living modestly, her dreams of stardom pinned to the playbills and photographs pinned to the walls. A faint smell of lavender lingered, undercut by the clinical odour of the police's forensic work. Jap led us to the bedroom where Carlotta had been found. Her body curled peacefully, as if in sleep, a bottle of veronal on the nightstand. No signs of a struggle, Jap said, gesturing to the tidy room. Looks like she took the stuff herself, but I don't buy it. She was young, talented, with a bright future. Why end it? Poirot's eyes swept the room. Pausing on a small desk cluttered with papers, he sifted through them, his gloved fingers. Delicate but purposeful letters, place scripts, a diary, he murmured. Mademoiselle Adams was a woman of words. Let us see what they tell us. He opened the diary. Its pages filled with neat, looping handwriting. I peered over his shoulder as he flipped to the last entry. Dated the day before her death, it read, Met? J.W. again. She's so kind, but there's something about her eyes. She asked me to do it one last performance. Said it would be our secret. I don't know if I can. The money would help, but it feels wrong. J.W., I said, my heart quickening. Jane Wilkinson? Poirot's eyes gleamed, perhaps, but we must not assume. The words they hint, but they do not confirm. Let us look further. He continued through the diary, pausing at an earlier entry. B.M. came by. He's pushing for the new play, says it's my big break. But he talks too much about J.W. I wonder if he's in love with her. B.M., I said. Brian Martin. Poirot nodded. It is possible. And it is interesting, non? Mademoiselle Adams was entangled with these people, Jane, Brian, perhaps others. Her death. It is no coincidence. We spent another hour combing through the flat, but found no further clues. As we stepped back into the chilly evening, Poirot's face was thoughtful, his mind clearly racing. The conversations, Hastings, he said as we climbed into a taxi. They are the key. Jane Wilkinson, Geraldine Marsh, Brian Martin, the butler, Ellis, all of them speak, but their words hide as much as they reveal. We must listen more closely. Over the next few days, Poirot's focus on clues in conversation intensified. He insisted on re-interviewing every witness, paying meticulous attention to their phrasing, their pauses, their gestures. I accompanied him, my notebook filling with observations that seemed trivial to me but clearly held weight for him. At one point, we revisited Ronald Marsh, Lord Edgware's nephew, who had been conspicuously absent from the dinner party but stood to inherit his uncle's fortune. Ronald, a lanky young man with a restless energy, met us at his club, his tie loosened and a glass of whiskey in hand. I've told you everything, he said, his voice edged with irritation. I was at my flat that night. Didn't see Uncle George. Didn't care to. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You call him George, monsieur? Yet you were not close, were? Ronald shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. He was a cold fish. Never liked me much, but he was still family. And the money? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. It is a large inheritance. Ronald's jaw tightened. I suppose. But I didn't kill him for it, if that's what you're getting at. Poirot smiled. I get at nothing, monsieur. I only listen. And your words, they are most interesting. As we left the club, I turned to Poirot. What was that about? He didn't say anything incriminating. Poirot chuckled. Did he not? His tone, Hastings, it was defensive, but also careless. He does not grieve for his uncle, yet he calls him George, just as the mysterious woman did. A coincidence, perhaps, but Poirot does not believe in coincidences. By the end of the week, Poirot's obsession with conversation had begun to bear fruit. He had compiled a list of what he called significant phrases, snippets from our interviews that, to my untrained ear, seemed innocuous, but to him were laden with meaning. Among them, Geraldine Marsh's hesitant "I don't recall" when asked if Jane left the dinner party. Brian Martin's overly enthusiastic praise of Jane's presence, coupled with his evasive glance. Ellis the butler's mention of the woman in the black cloak calling Lord Edgware George. Carlotta Adams' diary entries about J.W. and a mysterious performance. These are the crumbs, Hastings, Poirot said one evening, spreading his notes across the dining table. Each one small, but together they form a trail. The question is, where does it lead? I stared at the notes, my head swimming. To Jane Wilkinson, surely, everything points to her. Poirot shook his head. To simple mon ami. The truth, it is never so obvious. Jane Wilkinson is at the centre, yes, but not necessarily as the killer. There is another hand at work, one that uses her as a pawn or perhaps a mask. I frowned. A mask? You mean an impersonator? Poirot's eyes twinkled. You begin to see, Hastings. The words, they suggest a performance, a role played to perfection. Carlotta Adams, the actress, was known for her impersonations, and now she is dead. Why? Because she knew too much, or because she played her part too well. I leaned back, my mind reeling. So you think someone impersonated Jane Wilkinson to kill Lord Edgware? It is a possibility, Poirot said, but we must test it. Tomorrow we will speak again to Mademoiselle Wilkinson. Her words, they will tell us if she is the player or the played. The next morning, we found Jane Wilkinson at her suite in the Savoy, reclining on a chaise longue in a cloud of perfume and silk. Her golden hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her blue eyes sparkled with a mix of amusement and impatience as she greeted us. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, waving a manicured hand. This is all such a bore. I told you, I was at that dinner party. I didn't go near George that night. Why won't anyone believe me? Poirot's smile was disarming. Mademoiselle, I believe you, but I am curious about your friend, Mademoiselle. Carlotta Adams. You knew her well, non? Jane's smile faltered just for a moment. Carlotta. Oh, yes, sweet girl. Such a talent. I was devastated to hear about her death. You saw her recently? Poirot asked, his tone casual. Jane shrugged. A few weeks ago, maybe. We had tea. She was excited about a new role. Poor thing. And did she ever perform an impersonation? Have you? Poirot asked, his eyes fixed on her. Jane laughed, a bright, tinkling sound. Oh, all the time. She was brilliant at it. Got my voice, my walk, everything. It was like looking in a mirror. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. Most. Interesting. And did you ever ask her to perform this impersonation for a private audience? Jane's eyes narrowed, but her smile remained. What are you getting at? Mr. Poirot, I didn't ask her to do anything. We were friends, that's all. Merci, mademoiselle. Poirot said, rising, you have been most illuminating. As we left the Savoy, I turned to Poirot, exasperated. She's lying, isn't she? She practically admitted Carlotta could impersonate her perfectly. Poirot nodded. Oui, But she is not the only one who knows this. Someone else saw the opportunity in Mademoiselle Adam's talent. Someone who wished to use it to create an illusion. That evening, back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, his eyes half closed, his fingers steepled. I knew this pose well. It meant his mind was working at fever pitch, piecing together the fragments of the case. I sat opposite, waiting for him to speak. The conversations, Hastings, he said at last, his voice soft. They are like a symphony, each voice playing its part. But there is a discord, a note that does not belong. We have heard it, but we have not yet understood it. I leaned forward. What do you mean? He opened his eyes, and they were bright with certainty. The woman in the black cloak called Lord Edgware George. Jane Wilkinson. She calls him George in private, but not in public. Carlotta Adams. She could imitate Jane to perfection, and someone clever knew this and used it. The murder of Lord Edgware was a performance, Hastings, staged to perfection. But the second murder, that of Mademoiselle Adams, it was to silence the performer. I stared at him, my heart pounding. So Carlotta was the woman in the black cloak. She killed Lord Edgware pretending to be Jane. Poirot shook his head. Not necessarily. But she was part of the plan, willingly or not. Her death suggests she became a liability. We must find the one who wrote this deadly script. He rose, his movements brisk. Tomorrow, we return to Scotland Yard. I have questions, 5 questions that will unravel this mystery. The words, Hastings, they will lead us to the truth. As I watched him pace, I felt a familiar mix of awe and frustration. Poirot's mind was a labyrinth, and I was forever stumbling in its twists and turns. But one thing was certain, the clues in conversation were guiding us closer to the killer, and soon the curtain would fall on their carefully crafted performance. Chapter 8. A tangled motiveth morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft glow on the polished mahogany table where he sat, his breakfast untouched. His small, fastidious hands were folded neatly in his lap, and his egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he stared at the empty teacup before him. To an outsider, he might have appeared lost in thought, but Captain Hastings, seated across from him, knew better. Poirot was not merely thinking, he was dissecting, analyzing, unraveling the threads of the tangled web that was Lord Edgware's murder. Poirot, I ventured, setting down my own cup with a clink, you've been awfully quiet this morning. Have you made any sense of this blasted case? I mean, Jane Wilkinson's alibi is airtight, yet witnesses swear they saw her at Edgware's house. And now we've got his nephew, Ronald Marsh, sniffing about the inheritance. Not to mention that odd fellow from Edgware's past, what's his name? Carstairs. It's enough to make one's head spin. Poirot's mustache twitched, ashore. Sign that my words had stirred something in his formidable mind. Mon ami, he said, his voice calm but laced with that familiar note of reproach. The head. It does not spin if the little grey cells are properly employed. You see a tangle, yes, but to Hercule Poirot, it is merely a tapestry waiting to be woven into order. The threads, though, they are many, but they are not without pattern. I leaned forward, eager for clarity. Well, then, what's the pattern? You've got Jane Wilkinson, who wanted Edgware dead, but she was at that dinner party. Then there's Ronald, who stands to gain a fortune, and Carstairs, who seems to have some old grudge. And don't forget that second murder, Miss Adams, the actress's friend. Are we dealing with one killer or two? Poirot raised a finger, silencing me. Patience, Hastings, the pattern. It emerges not from rushing to conclusions, but from observing the details. Let us begin with the motives, for it is in the motives that we find the heart of this crime. And the heart, it is often a messy thing, none? He rose, his movements precise, and crossed to the fireplace, where a small notebook lay on the mantel. He opened it, flipping through pages filled with his meticulous handwriting. First, we have Mademoiselle Jane Wilkinson. Her motive is clear, or so it seems. She wishes to be free of Lord Edgware to marry her duke. Yet her alibi is, as you say, airtight. 12 respectable witnesses place her at a dinner party in Chiswick at the very hour of the murder. Curious, is it not? Curious, I echoed. It's impossible. Unless she's got a twin sister running about, which I highly doubt. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A twin, you say? No, no. Hastings, we need not resort to such theatrical devices yet. But the idea of a double, it is not without merit. We shall return to that. For now, let us consider the nephew, Monsieur Ronald Marsh. I nodded, recalling the young man's dishevelled appearance and nervous demeanour when we'd questioned him. Ronald Marsh, Lord Edgware's nephew, was a man in his late 20s, with a penchant for gambling and a reputation for living beyond his means. He's got motive. All right, I said. Edgware's fortune would solve all his debts. But he claims he was at his club that night, and the porter confirmed it. The porter. Poirot murmured, tapping his notebook. A most convenient alibi, and yet alibis, they are like glass sometimes, they crack under pressure. We must ask ourselves, what does Monsieur Ronald hide? His debts, they are substantial. And his uncle, he was not generous. A man in such straits might take desperate measures. And then there's Carstairs, I added, thinking of the shadowy figure who had surfaced in our inquiries. Gerald Carstairs, a former business associate of Lord Edgware, had been ruined years ago in a financial deal gone sour, one that Edgware had orchestrated. He's got reason to hate Edgware. Japp mentioned he was seen loitering near the house a week before the murder. Precisement. Poirot said, his voice sharp, Monsieur Carstairs. He carries the grudge of a man betrayed. But a grudge alone does not a murderer make. We must look deeper. What of the second victim, Mademoiselle Adams? Her death, it is no coincidence. She was Jane Wilkinson's friend, yes, but also her confidant. Did she know something dangerous? Something that made her a target? I frowned, trying to piece it together. You think the murders are connected, then? But how Miss Adams was? Strangled, not stabbed like Edgware. It feels different. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Different, yet the same. The method, it changes, but the intent, it remains. The killer, he is clever. Hastings, he varies his approach to confuse. US, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily confused. Let us examine the financial angle. For money, it is often the root of such evils. He paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back. Lord Edgware, he was a man of wealth, but also of secrets. His fortune, it was not as secure as it seemed. Japp has uncovered documents suggesting Edgware was entangled in risky investments. If these failed, his estate might have been diminished. Who would suffer most from such a loss? The nephew, perhaps, who expected a grand inheritance, or another, who relied on Edgware's wealth for their own schemes. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar frustration of trying to keep up with Poirot's leaps of logic. So, you're saying the motive might be money, but not just Ronald's debts? Maybe someone else was banking on Edgware's fortune. Exactement, Poirot said, pausing to adjust a crooked picture frame on the wall. And then there is the matter of romance. Mademoiselle Jane, she is in love with the Duke of Merton, or so she claims. But love, it can be a mask for ambition. The Duke, he is wealthy, titled, and most importantly unmarried. For Jane to secure him, she must be free of Edgware. But what if there is another layer? What if her heart, it is not so pure as she pretends? I blinked, caught off guard. You think Jane's lying about the Duke? But why? She's got everything to gain by marrying him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Everything, yes, but at what cost? The heart, it is treacherous, Hastings. And then there is the scandal, the whispers of Lord Edgware's past. Japp has heard rumours of a woman, a former mistress perhaps, who was cast aside. Could she, or someone connected to her, seek revenge? I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed. So, we've got money, love, and revenge all tangled up. And that's not even counting the impersonation theory you hinted at earlier. Poirot, how do you make sense of it all? He turned to me, his expression serene. By method, mon ami. By observing, by questioning, by arranging the facts in the mind like pieces on a chessboard. Let us visit the scene of the crime once more. There perhaps the little grey cells will find the thread that unravels the knot. An hour later, we stood in the library of Lord Edgware's Regent's Park mansion, a cavernous room lined with bookshelves and heavy with the scent of old leather and wax polish. The spot where Edgware's body had been found, a deep stab wound to the chest, had been cleaned, but the air still felt oppressive, as if the room itself held its breath. Chief Inspector Japp was already there, his notebook in hand, his face etched with frustration. "Poirot, Hastings," he greeted us gruffly. "I hope you've got something new, because I'm at my wit's end. The coroner's report confirms Edgware died between 9 and 10 p.m. But Jane Wilkinson was at that dinner party in Chiswick, miles away. We've checked the guest list, the servants, even the cab drivers. Her story holds up." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "And yet, someone saw her here, none. A woman in a green dress, with Jane's face, her mannerisms. Tell me, Japp, what do you make of this doppelganger?" Japp snorted. "Doppelganger? More like a mistake. The witness, that old butler, he's half blind. Probably saw some other blonde in a fancy dress and got confused." "Perhaps," Poirot said, but his tone suggested otherwise. He knelt by the fireplace, examining the hearth with a magnifying glass, and yet the butler, he was certain. The dress, the voice, it was Mademoiselle Jane. He swore. "Tell me, Japp, have you considered the possibility of a disguise?" Japp's eyebrows shot up. "A disguise? You mean someone dressed up as Jane Wilkinson to frame her? That's a bit far-fetched, even for you, Poirot." "Not to frame her, perhaps," Poirot said, rising and brushing dust from his trousers, "but to confuse, to create doubt. The killer, he is clever, Japp. He plays with our perceptions, like a magician with his tricks." I watched as Poirot moved to the desk where Edgware's papers were still scattered, evidence bags neatly labelled, "By Japp's men." "What are you looking for, Poirot?" I asked. "A connection," he replied, picking up a letter and studying it closely. "Something that ties the motives together. Money, love, revenge, they are not separate, Hastings. They are entwined like the roots of a tree. Find the root, and you find the truth." Japp sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Well, while you're chasing roots, I've got Ronald Marsh coming in for questioning again. His alibis, solid, but his finances are a mess. And then there's Carstairs. Turns out he was in debt to Edgware, too. If you ask me, this case is a bloody tangle." Poirot's smile was almost pitying. "A tangle, yes, but not without solution. Tell me, Japp, have you examined the financial records of Mademoiselle Adams?" Japp blinked. "Adams? The second victim? Why would we?" "She was just Jane's friend, caught in the crossfire, most likely." Poirot's eyes gleamed with that infuriating spark of insight. "Just a friend, or perhaps a pawn in a larger game. I suggest you look into her accounts, Japp. You may find something illuminating." That afternoon, we returned to Poirot's flat, where he immediately set to work, spreading papers and notes across the table. I watched, fascinated, as he muttered to himself, drawing lines between names and motives in his notebook. "Money, love, revenge," he murmured. "They are the pillars of this crime. But there is a fourth element, Hastings, something we have overlooked." "What's that?" I asked, leaning forward. "Deception," he said simply. "The killer, he does not merely act, he conceals. He creates a false narrative, a shadow play to distract us. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through shadows." I was about to press him further when the telephone rang. It was Japp, his voice crackling with excitement. "Poirot, you were right about Adams. We checked her bank records. Turns out she was getting regular payments from an anonymous account. Thousands of pounds deposited over the last 6 months. And get this, the account's linked to one of Edgware's holding companies, Poirot's." Face lit up. "Magnifique. Japp, you have found the thread. Now, we must pull it. Trace the account. Find its source, and while you are at it, Look into the movements of Monsieur Carstairs on the night of the second murder. I have a suspicion. He is not as peripheral as he seems. As Japp hung up, I turned to Poirot, my mind racing. Payments to Miss Adams from Edgware. But why? Was she blackmailing him? Poirot shook his head. Not blackmail, perhaps, but involvement. She knew something, Hastings. Something worth killing for. And now, we must ask, did Jane Wilkinson know it, too? The next day brought a flurry of new developments. Japp's men had traced the anonymous account to a shell company owned by Lord Edgware, confirming that Miss Adams had been receiving payments for reasons unknown. Meanwhile, Carstairs had been spotted near Miss Adams's flat on the night of her murder, though he claimed he was merely passing through. Ronald Marsh, too, had been less than forthcoming in his second interview, admitting to a heated argument with his uncle days before the murder. Poirot, however, seemed more interested in a seemingly trivial detail, a theatre programme found among Miss Adams's belongings. It was for a play Jane Wilkinson had starred in, autographed by the actress herself. But what caught Poirot's eye was a faint pencil. Mark a phone number written in a hurried scrawl. Curious, he murmured, holding the programme to the light. This number, it is not local. I wonder. Hastings, make a note. We must trace this number at once. I did as he asked, though I couldn't see the significance. A phone number. It could belong to anyone. Poirot, a friend, a colleague, or a conspirator, he interrupted. In a case such as this, no detail is too small. The little grey cells, they tell me this number is important. By evening, the picture was becoming clearer, though no less complex. The phone number belonged to a private investigator in Paris, a man known for digging into the affairs of the wealthy and discreet. Poirot's inquiries revealed that the investigator had been hired by Miss Adams to look into Lord Edgware's financial dealings, a dangerous move, given Edgware's reputation for ruthlessness. So, Miss Adams was snooping, I said, piecing it together. She found something incriminating, and Edgware was paying her to keep quiet. But why kill her? Poirot's expression was grave. Because Hastings, she did not keep quiet. She told someone, perhaps Jane, perhaps another, and that someone decided she was a liability. I felt a chill. Jane Wilkinson, I said. It always comes back to her, doesn't it? But her alibi is perfect, Poirot finished. To perfect, perhaps. Let us revisit the night of the murder, Hastings. The butler saw a woman in a green dress, yes, but what if it was not Jane? What if it was someone dressed as Jane, someone who knew her habits, her mannerisms, someone close to her? I stared at him, my mind reeling. You mean an impostor? But who and why? Poirot's smile was triumphant. That, mon ami, is the question, and when we answer it, we will have our killer. The days that followed were a whirlwind of investigation. Poirot, Japp, and I interviewed witnesses, pored over financial records, and traced every lead, no matter how small. The theatre programme led to a Paris hotel where Miss Adams had stayed, where a maid recalled seeing her with a man matching Carstairs's description. Ronald Marsh's debts, meanwhile, were found to be partially owed to a loan shark with ties to Edgware's business dealings, and Jane Wilkinson, ever the charming actress, remained elusive, her alibi unshakable, but her sincerity increasingly questionable. One evening, as Poirot and I sat by the fire, he laid out his theory. The motive, Hastings, it is threefold. Money, love, and revenge all woven together. The killer, he seeks to gain Edgware's fortune, to protect a romantic ambition, and to settle an old score. But to do so, he must create confusion, a smokescreen of alibis and misdirection. So, who is it? I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Ronald, Carstairs, or Jane? Poirot's eyes twinkled. All in good time, mon ami. Tomorrow, we shall visit the Duke of Merton. I have a feeling he may hold the final piece of the puzzle. The visit to the Duke of Merton's estate was a revelation. The Duke, a reserved but courteous man, confirmed his affection for Jane Wilkinson, but expressed unease about her insistence on a quick marriage. "She's intense," he admitted, and she spoke of Edgware as if he were already gone. Long before his death, Poirot's questions were subtle but probing, and by the time we left, he was humming to himself a sure sign he was closing. And on the truth, back at the flat, he spread out his notes once more, circling names and drawing arrows between them. "Hastings," he said at last, "the tapestry is nearly complete. The killer, he is bold, but he has made one mistake, a small thing, but to Hercule Poirot, it is everything." "What mistake?" I demanded. He held up the theatre programme, pointing to the phone number. "This," he said, "it was not Miss Adams who wrote it. The handwriting, it matches another's, and that other, they are at the heart of this crime." The final piece fell into place the following morning when Japp arrived with news. The Paris investigator had confirmed that Miss Adams had uncovered evidence of a scandal involving Lord Edgware, a scandal that could have ruined not only him, but several others, including a prominent figure in Jane Wilkinson's circle. The payments to Miss Adams were hush money, but someone had decided she was too great a risk. Poirot, his eyes alight, clapped his hands. "Sacred you, the motive, it is clear now. Money to protect a fortune, love to secure a future, and revenge to settle a past wrong. The killer, they thought themselves clever, but they underestimated Hercule Poirot." As he spoke, I felt a surge of excitement. The tangled motives were unraveling, and the truth was within reach. But who was the mastermind behind it all, and how had they pulled off such an elaborate scheme?